What's up? Is this working? Yeah, sorry, that was probably super loud. I don't know how to change the volume on that thing. I have no idea what it sounded like. Can you guys hear me at all? It's been so long since I've done this that I don't remember if I have everything set up correctly. So let me know. Okay, we can hear me. Okay, good, 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 good. How are you guys? How have y'all been? Should have filled up my water before stream. Oh well. Very good, very good. Yeah, sorry it's been forever. I had two back-to-back really busy semesters right after everything started taking off. So it's been, unfortunately, got to prioritize school a little bit. So been doing that mostly and drawing a ton, but nothing explicitly for SpireHelm, unfortunately. My last project, which I'd say I'm like moderately happy with. It's not my favorite thing I've ever done, but my last final was on Wednesday. It was like a visual literacy and narrative illustration type of class. So we did like thumbnail processes and illustrations and composition and whatnot. And I don't know if this is, it's probably not SpireHelm. It's just a generic fantasy like goblin dude who owns a museum maybe. And he has his little office that he does. I probably can't even see what's going on here. I have oh wait, I think I have it in here somewhere. Let me just pull it up. There it is. Yeah, this is my final. I hate graphite. I really, really don't like graphite as a rendering medium. Unfortunately for this class, we could only use graphite for our projects. And so just the value structure is bonkers. Like the darkest dark is what? A freaking like 40% gray, which is not great. I mean, you might be able to find some, what is that? Okay, like an 80, but the value is, it's all out there. But anyways, this was kind of fun. This is just like a bunch of magical stuff. You got like the Ring of Power, and I don't think that's from Elden Ring. Just found like a bunch of random references. We had to include 50 items or 50 objects that were unique, so I don't know. Wasn't my favorite. Once again, I really don't like graphite, but I had this one I did that could have been, I don't know. This one I didn't even finish. It's just like the idea was there, but the execution was terrible, so we just kind of skipped that one. But yeah, I did like figure drawing classes this semester, so I'm way better at drawing people now. But other than that, I haven't been able to really lock in on SpireHelm for pretty much the whole time. So it's been fun to see, like check in here and there and see what you guys have been up to. But yeah, I'm back now, hopefully at least for the summer. I mean, I have some weeks I'll be gone, but other than that, I should be at least more frequently in here. So yeah, let's see here. I have a bit of some things I want to talk about today. Mostly just what the structure of SpireHelm will look like going forward. And a bit of that, yeah, we'll talk about kind of the canon requests and stuff like that. This might actually be easier. Let's see. There we go. If this works. Oh man, it doesn't work. So I want to figure out a bit what SpireHelm can be and what it should be and what we can really like do with it accurately well. Because I feel like so far it's been really fun, but I feel like we've kind of lost. I mean, this is also on me. I'm not saying it's like, oh, you guys all suck. I'm just saying like the ambition is there, but I wonder about the actual long-term. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Possibility, like if it's actually possible to do what we talked about doing originally, or if we need to kind of shift and figure out what would be realistic. So I want to start off mostly with this like primacy, or I guess we could call it priorities. Oh, my finger's in the wrong spot. Because I think if I feel like we're a little out of order. I feel like right now, if we were to have this here, this would be like the order. It would go lore, and then writing, and then art, and then at the end we'd hopefully have some retro dark fantasy content. And I want to fill this in this stream quite a bit. I feel like we need to go backwards a little bit and figure out if our main goal is retro dark fantasy content, what order of things should we have? Like what is the best way to do this, instead of putting in lore and then hoping that in the end we get this retro dark fantasy. I don't know if that makes sense, but if that makes sense, let me know. If not, let me know. Let me see here. I had some other ideas. While my obsidian is loading. Okay, not you. You. So I feel like as of right now, what we're doing and what we've been doing isn't really sustainable. At least not yet. Let me talk about some of my concerns so far. Where are my concerns? So the current concerns I have are mostly that there's too much that people would need to learn or know in order to join the project. For new writers or for existing writers, I feel like there's just too much stuff. Even with just the stuff I've written, I feel like it's a little too dense. This might go back to, let's add another card here. We'll just say vibes for now. This would be, I think the most important thing for dark fantasy content is the vibes. I feel like the thing that got most of us in here, if not all of us, at least that got me started, and the vision I have for SpireHelm is I wouldn't even call it exactly retro dark fantasy. I would call it what we perceive nowadays to be what retro dark fantasy was, even if it's not entirely accurate. We have better technology now, we have new things, whatever. But in our minds, we have this vision of that I didn't even really live through. This was like 80s. This was 20 years before I was born. People were, watching cartoons, reading books, playing old school D&D, that type of thing. And those vibes is kind of what I want to capture, because I feel like in modern times, fantasy is co-opted primarily by modern D&D, other fantasy things, books. You could say Brandon Sanderson, he's kind of sci-fi fantasy. Since starting this project, I've actually read 2 and almost all of the 3rd book of the Stormlight Archive, which has changed my opinions quite a bit on his style of fantasy, Brandon Sanderson's, and also some stuff with SpireHelm that I feel like now that I've read Brandon Sanderson, I'm like, oh, actually there's a lot of things in here that I came up with that are maybe too reminiscent of things in his books. Maybe not, and maybe it doesn't matter since they're completely different genres. But, let me read chat really quick. You want to have a goal already pre-made for the work to go towards instead of hoping the work leads towards the goal, pretty much. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, in terms of most important things, I think vibes are the most important. Yeah, I think I don't dislike Brandon Sanderson. I just am realizing that my perception of him going in was very different than my perception of him now after 3,000 pages of his books. He is not, and this might be I don't know, I don't think this is a hot take, but I think I don't think he is a fantasy writer. His version of fantasy, you can argue fantasy is an arbitrary term, whatever. His version of fantasy is very much sci-fi fantasy. The magic appears as science. It does not appear as magic. It's not unknown. It's not unknowable. It's very understood. Even if they don't understand everything, they are sciencifying it. There is measurements of magic and how long it lasts and where it comes from and all these different things that turn magic into more of a science than an actual fantasy magic. If we go back to arguably the father of fantasy being Tolkien, the way he writes about magic and kings and politics and countries or kingdoms, whatever, is extremely different than how Brandon Sanderson writes about fantasy. And because Brandon Sanderson is currently the most ambitious writer, he's writing books and books and books a year, people look to him as the kind of the poster child of what a fantasy writer should be. And I think that is where people go wrong. It's because everybody thinks, oh, well, Brandon Sanderson is famous. Brandon Sanderson writes big, long books, and he's been really successful, so I should write like Brandon Sanderson. And I think that's exactly where SpireHelm is being kind of drifting in this Sanderson direction. And I don't think that's healthy for SpireHelm. I've actually enjoyed his books quite a bit, but I don't think his style of fantasy is what we should be doing here in SpireHelm. I think we should maybe, if Brandon Sanderson was a teenager in the 80s, maybe. He wasn't there. He was there experiencing it, which inspired him to go and make his books, but he is not writing for this retro dark fantasy vibe. He is writing for a modern sci-fi fantasy genre. He invented it, basically. But he did not invent fantasy. And if we go back to, Tolkien, we get much closer. Once again, I don't want to just replicate Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth because that already exists and people are already in love with that. The point here is to create new dark fantasy, retro dark fantasy content. Yeah, keeping fantasy archetypes is probably the most important thing. So that's where like the vibes come in. So let's break vibes off. Let's keep adding to this. So traditional / familiar archetypes. I think this is definitely one that vibes goes into. It's with I'm gonna maybe keep using Brandon Sanderson just because I've been reading his books for 100 hours in the past semester or so, past few months. If you look at the knights in the Cosmere, you have like these shard bearers who have this magical armor and magical swords that appear and disappear at will. That is a very different type of knight than the chivalric knights of like medieval literature, like the Knights of the Round Table, which is where most of the traditional fantasy stereotypes, archetypes for knights come from. And so I think if somebody has that vision in their brain of like, oh, I know like Conan the Barbarian and these other like dungeon crawling, dude with a sword rescuing the blacksmith's daughter. That's like the classic D&D like starting adventure. And then they come in here and they see something completely different then they have to learn, okay, well, what does it mean to be a shard bearer? Because in Brandon Sanderson's books, it means like, okay, well, you have to have either fought someone for a shard blade and then you earn it, or you get one from becoming some type of radiant or whatever. And there's all these different, like, you have to understand these levels and prerequisites for becoming a knight. Whereas it's much easier to go, if I'm coming into SpireHelm, I assume we are going to find typical chivalric knights. They're going to be using swords, axes, traditional fantasy weapons, and I assume we'll find some magical ones as well, but it's not going to be like at the forefront of everything. It's just different. A king is going to be a king. We think about kings on thrones and having their knights and their guard and their kingdom, their little realm, or we have lords that, go up to a kingdom and whatever. And I think that's really helpful. for people to come in and understand that and be able to find it instead of having to go, oh, this is like a whole new sci-fi thing where I have to learn a bunch of names and different types of science and magic and these things that all connect, which is really cool when you're reading. But once again, I'm not Brandon Sanderson and I'm not writing a book right now. So it just, yeah, doesn't quite work like that. Let's see here. Should not be trying to be descriptive of the world. Should be trying to be descriptive, not prescriptive. Yeah. Clear archetype, simple, easy to understand, lore for each character. Yep. We advised to veer away from the taxonomy and evolutionary elements to the species just to avoid the sci-fi fantasy feel. Yeah, I think so. I think we'll talk about that a bit. Because I'm thinking, I really enjoyed reading through everybody's ideas and things, but I think we might have to shift a little bit more, or at least for now, it may come down to me having to write quite a bit more to get things because I feel like right now I have like a really, really wide frame that's just like kind of patched and I'm kind of saying, hey, fill in whatever. I don't know if that's going to keep working. We may have to have me fill in the frame completely before people start trying to expand things. We might have to, I don't know, scale back a little bit because I think the scope creep is a real thing and we've kind of had fun. But I just don't know if that's sustainable or realistic. So yeah, we'll touch on that a bit. Imagine archivists as scientists and explorers who'd be doing their best to categorize and discover new information. Yeah, I think there's a bit of that as well, and we may need to touch on that as well because I think what I've been thinking a lot about it, and I've just been thinking, is what we're doing possible for what we're trying to get to? Because I think right now we're kind of just writing to write, and yeah, we've ended up with these like collectors that are scientists, discoverers, adventurers, whatever. And I like that, but I just don't know how much we can do with that before it just turns into a giant wiki full of nothingness, you know? Epistolary writing. What does epistolary mean? Describing literature, correspondence written from the form of letters, diaries, or documents. Rather outside that constraint. Right. Yeah, I could see that. If I think I'm understanding you correctly. Like how we collect artifacts for an archive. Yeah, I think that's the main issue I've been running into with is SpireHelm possible? Is it actually going to work going forward? Is what does the collaboration look like? Because I think maybe that's a new card we should add. The original vision was I've had multiple different original visions. The original vision I started with a few months ago was collaboration. Maybe that goes under. I don't know if it's quite as important as vibes. We'll put it up here though. I wanted a place where everybody could contribute and we could build a world together because I think everybody's inspired by different things. Everybody has creative ideas and I think they're all cool. And it'd be cool to bring them together in a place where it's encouraged, not discouraged, and where you're an active participant in the world, not a passive one. And maybe that's a good card. Versus passive. I don't know why I keep hitting enter, thinking it's gonna do stuff. Put this here. I think there's two different sides to this. We have writing lore / world. Let's do this. Say helping direct the narrative. I don't know if I know I haven't really touched on it because it was one of those things that I didn't think would be after looking at my current skill level and what I think is possible for me to do realistically, the Wanderer was one of those things that kind of got canned for a bit indefinitely because I just don't know how to do it. But I really liked the idea of kind of a comic series. I don't know if it'd be comic or narrative or whatever. Illustrations that would progress in a story of 1 to 3 characters, each in their own respective elements, that would be interacting with the world of SpireHelm, but I would present it kind of like a D&D situation or a choose your own adventure, where at the end of every little episode, there would be a choice or a decision to be made, and the audience would get to decide where that character goes and how they interact with it. And through that, we would push the narrative in certain directions and build the world and the lore. I looked at that and I went, I'm not that fast or that good of an illustrator yet. That was almost a year ago when I was starting to think about these things. I've since gotten a lot better, thank heavens. I've been drawing more than I've been doing anything else in my life, and so I've been getting significantly better, especially with drawing people. I had previously never drawn people because I avoided it. I was a spaceship guy. I liked Star Wars. I wanted to do concept art for Star Wars. And now I've taken 2 semesters straight of just figure drawing, gesture drawing, and have been practicing it on my own because I've enjoyed it, and I've gotten significantly better. I don't even know if I have any examples to show. I probably do somewhere. I don't know. I was really bad at drawing people, and now I'm a lot better. Although most of the people I've been drawing have been like nude reference and live drawing, so not super applicable to like specific character design, but I understand how anatomy works, and I understand where bones and muscles go, which is a huge part of proportion and making things look right. So I would be better at doing this now. Anyways, back to the Wanderer. That was my original idea, but I realized I wasn't as good at drawing as I wanted to be and or as fast, and so it would take a long time to get out each episode, and if I wanted to do 1 or 2 a week, I just don't know if I have that kind of skill. In addition to that, I would have to be writing it, which I could probably do, but once again, it's that plus the illustration process would possibly take too long for it to be something that's sustainable and that people would grasp onto and not completely forget about and have to restart every single time. So then I transitioned a little bit to, well, why don't we just all collaborate and build the world together, which seems fun and cool, and I was not opposed to the idea. But now I'm looking at that as well and going, is this even sustainable? And or are we just going to end up creating the most generic fantasy because we have an amalgamation? I mean, you look at, not that I'm comparing us to AI, obviously we're anti-AI, because the whole point is that humans can do it better. The difference is that when you have 1 million humans sourcing, not 1 million, or a couple thousand, but when you have hundreds of humans sourcing things together, it's almost the same as if AI sources from hundreds of different sources and pulls stuff together. So if you say, hey, AI, give me a unique fantasy world, what it's actually doing is pulling from all of these different fantasy worlds that already exist and pulling unique elements and mushing them together. And so you don't get anything unique. And so with this, if all of us are just dumping our own ideas into stuff, we're going to kind of end up in the same spot, just with human unique ideas, but we're going to end up with something very generic that has everything from knights to kingdoms to continents to magic systems and wizards and, you know, all these different things. And it doesn't end up feeling unique at all. It just ends up feeling just as generic as everything else, just with maybe a front layer of retro dark fantasy art, which is also its own difficult thing, because I've realized very quickly that that kind of art is extremely difficult to make and to do, and takes a lot of skill and talent and dedication and certain processes to do that I've never learned, because I didn't learn airbrushing. I know mostly digital art with some drawing physically, but I've never done extensive acrylic painting or gouache or oil painting. So that's kind of one of those things as well. So I don't really know where we go from here, and that's kind of what this stream is for, is to figure out, can we reorganize this to make sure that everything is in the right order, and maybe that will give us the answers of like, well, what does the future actually look like and how can we actually get it done? Let me catch up on stuff. The vibe should be like looking into a church, but never knowing what the actual happens inside. Throwing away epistolary writing would kind of screw you over. Yeah, that would not be fun. within the library. Yeah, and that's the hard thing. With the world building and lore, I wanted it to be in the archive. But that kind of limits quite a bit of what you can write, more or less, in a way. And so I'm not exactly sure what to do with that, because it does kind of limit you to only writing, if we're doing like the epistolary writing where it's person to person or collected documents or journals and entries and stuff. It feels cool, but it can also limit you, which can be bad. So I don't know. Let's go back up to here. We'll touch on collaboration in a bit. I think once we figure out what else we can do, or what we're going for, it might be easier to figure out what the collaboration will look like. Let's go back to vibes. So we have traditional archetypes. We have old school art, I think. Keep pressing enter, and I don't mean to. Let's stack these like this. No. That's not at all what I wanted. What I think is that the archive can be whatever, but it's like SpireHelm where there's a bunch of books that could be true or not, and that's fine, but then there's a separate thing with core lore. Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk about is collaboration. I don't know if it goes under collaboration. I don't know where it will go. But I want to go... Let's go known lore. We'll make it its own thing for now, and we'll slot it in once we know where it goes. One of the big problems I've seen, and I feel with SpireHelm so far, is that there's too much stuff for any new person to know. And I want any newcomer to be able to learn everything in like 20 minutes. Everything they would need to know in like literally 20 minutes. Like a single video of mine or something. I don't want there to be a kingdom that they don't know about. I don't want there to be a village. Villages are obviously different, but like regions, kingdoms, kings, orders, all of that should be able to be figured out within 20 minutes tops, which sounds really, really narrow. But at the same time, if you think back to like, if you think about the dark fantasy vibes that we're going for, most of it's pretty simple. There's like knights, there's monsters, and there's all the monsters you can probably think of realistically, but they're all familiar-ish fantasy knight or monsters. So let's do... Why does that look so big? And then I think it's okay to have some of the more deep things, because I think a lot of fun, when I think about most of the IPs that I've gotten into, a lot of the fun comes from not knowing everything. When there's more to find out, it's interesting. I mean, when I started Brandon Sanderson's books, the first book felt like my eyes like were opened entirely new. It was just a new world with new magic and new science and new characters and new places and new physics in a way. Like the way the world works was completely unique, and that's really fun because it's like I want to figure out how everything works. Why does this happen? Why is that? Asking those why questions is really, really fun. If you know everything, it's not that fun. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example that's really shallow. I can't think of any fantasy ones, but like Lord of the Rings, you can, I don't know, this is hard because I've kind of known Lord of the Rings my whole life, and it's a really staple part of fantasy, but you can kind of know most of the stuff. You know, like there's men, elves, dwarves, boink, that's, oh, and hobbits, and that's pretty much it. There are very few other exceptions for like the main races. You don't have to go through like the D&D or Draw Steel, whatever TTRPG you're playing, where they have like 50 races and then sub races, and you mix those races. You have like half elves and all these different things. I think there are technically half elves in Lord of the Rings, but I don't know exactly who's who. But it's pretty much men, elves, dwarfs, hobbits, and that's it. And then you have the kingdoms. You have Gondor, Rohan. You have the elves. You have the wood elves. You have you have like the Darkwood elves. Oh man, I'm forgetting the name now. The Mirkwood elves. You've got Lothlorien, and you've got Rivendell, and I'm sure there are others, but like central to the story, those are like the ones that are important. The hobbits live in the Shire. You go east and you meet more men, and then you have like the kingdoms of men. You have the dwarves in the mountains, and you have the Lonely Mountain. You have the Iron Hills. That's it. And the wizards, you've got Gandalf the Grey, Saruman the White, the Blue Wizards, Radagast. There's like what, 5 or is there 6? I don't remember. And so like that's pretty much it. And that was like what, 5 minutes that I talked to you like most of the main important stuff. And obviously there's more intense, like Aragorn. If you're prefacing the story of Lord of the Rings from the beginning of the Hobbit or the Fellowship, you could touch on the lore about Sauron and the Ring. You could touch about the 5 wizards, the kingdoms of men, the kingdoms of dwarves. You could talk about, you think about the intro to the Lord of the Rings movies that's narrated by Galadriel, and like that's it. It's like pretty much all you would need to start. And there's some little bits of like, oh, Aragorn is actually the rightful heir to the throne of Gondor, and that's like the next step down, and then you can kind of keep going. And there is vast amounts of lore. You have the Silmarillion, you have the appendices, you have all of the Hobbit and the other books and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe we should build an intro to build off of. Paradoxically, I would say fleshing out a few things like religion, main city, regions, would actually allow newcomers to pick it up faster. Exactly. So I think that's where I need to, let's say GA needs to finish the frame. If we were to talk about this like a picture, we've talked about it before, I want you guys to add the depth to the frame this way, and I will expand the frame this way as we need it. And I want to start with a pretty narrow frame so that for newcomers, it's as easy to get into as anything else. Like even Warhammer, which I've been into since high school, was introduced to me fairly quickly. I had a math teacher who started a club for Warhammer, and he said, hey, I run this Warhammer club. If any of you guys are interested, come during the flex hour of school. And so I did, and it was cool. And he said, hey, this is the rundown. There's an emperor. He had 20 children or whatever, and some of them went bad and some of them were good. Horus was the one who started the bad guys. And then he just ran me through all the ones. Oh, these are the orcs. These are the Ultramarines. They're kind of like the clone troopers if you were to compare it to Star Wars. And then you've got all these different things. And the lore goes on forever. You can read books and books and books. But for now, here's the basics. And it was over in 5 or 10 minutes. And I went, that seems cool. I like the Adeptus Mechanicus, and I think the Tau look really cool. And he played Tau, and he showed off his Tau model. So I went, dang, those look pretty cool. And I love mechs. And so, lo and behold, I started getting into Tau and whatnot. And so I think I started off, my mistake was, A, I didn't expect this to blow up as fast as it did. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a slow burn. And B, I hadn't written enough background. I hadn't finished the frame. And so I kind of started you guys in a bad place of saying, well, let's just like fill it in and see what happens, which is fun, but I don't think it's long-term sustainable or really healthy for newcomers. Let's talk about vibes. We're going to split this off here. What's the word? Unique? The other thing is obviously, there's no point in creating something super generic. So we should probably come up with something that has at least a little bit of personality. And we probably need to answer the question of what does that personality look like and how do we get there? So far, I would say a split off of this is the Ignispecs. That's probably the most unique thing I've come up with for SpireHelm that still feels like a traditional archetype, but with a twist of, instead of it just being an oracle, these oracles burn your tithes, and therefore they have their own little set of rules. Yeah, anyways. Is the archive supposed to feel more like an academia? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know exactly what you mean. Like a school kind of, where they're studying the things that they find, collectors that research things. I would assume so. And that's also the question I want to ask is the archive actually a good idea? Or is this gonna run us into, like, I don't know, a wall? Because I think that's the fun part. And if not, then what does collaboration look like? Yeah, I don't know what the content would look like, or how that would go. Um, so maybe in between here, we add a or maybe that's the wrong spot to do this. Let's delete this. We'll go here. With their own twist / interpretation. So I think this is I don't even know why this is up here. Let's move this down here and let's break this off. Let's just throw that here. So I'm trying to think of good. I mean, the Ignis specs is a great example where the archetype is oracles, mystic beings that see the future. Those are kind of everywhere. Fortune telling or future telling and oracles are kind of in traditional fantasy somehow, whether it's the Palantir from or the Palantir, depending on how you pronounce it, from Lord of the Rings. I guess that's more of a communication device. But most fantasies have people seeking out future telling oracles, whatever. The twist on it is, instead of them just looking into a crystal ball or other things, we have the Ignis specs that burns and reads the flames of the tithes, and each is limited by whatever their tithe is, their domain, and so there's that. If we look at like Elden Ring, there's a difference of, like, gods is a good one, where most fantasies have gods. Elden Ring takes the twist to their gods are, in a sense, mortals. Not like I guess they're kind of immortal. And you look at their family tree, and the twist is, I don't even know if there is really a twist. They're kind of like, there are some that are Empyreans that are potential heirs to the throne of God over the lands between, and so they can kind of fight for it. It's not like the gods have been the gods forever. They're kind of, I don't know, modern is the word, but they're current. They're currently things happening in deity. Whereas, like, if you look at Greek mythology, the stuff happened at, like, the creation of the earth, and then Zeus has been Zeus since all humanity has lived, and they've, like, you're not, like, things aren't actively happening. You don't just wake up one day and there's, like, a guy running around with a scroll saying that, like, Zeus killed Athena. That just doesn't happen in Greek mythology. And so the twist is that you're actually living in the fantasy, which is the fantasy. That's, like, what makes fantasy fantasy, is that you're actually a part of the magic that's happening. It's not just something that happened a long time ago that's explaining what we see now. It is the happening that's happening now. Archive is a good idea as long as you create some guardrails. Yeah. Fantasy SCP-esque archive. Yeah. I assumed the SCP-esque was the goal. Different sections of the archive for stuff. Yeah. The difference with the SCP feels very secretive. The archive is meant to be mostly public, but there are some things that are secret, obviously. And that the realm is actually worth protecting The archive in and of itself probably isn't an evil organization. They just do some shady things here and there to cover their tracks, or to do what they think is the noble thing to do, which is to keep the public safe from these things. I guess you could say the same thing about SCP, if I understand it right. Anyways, so I think starting with traditional familiar archetypes is probably a good idea, and then putting our own twist or interpretation on it, or adding a couple of different things to it, could be good. For example, fantasy races. I can't remember ever seeing any AI generated or otherwise art from retro dark fantasy era that includes races other than humans, dwarves, elves, goblins, that kind of thing. That's kind of what people expect, and I think that's a good thing to go off of. If we wanted to add one or two more, I think that could be okay. If we wanted to twist one or two of them, I think that's okay. But I think going all the way in on everything like D&D does, I think will lead us more to generic fantasy, modern fantasy, than it will to traditional old school style fantasy. Let me get a drink really quick. Yeah, Tar summed it up pretty good. We're kind of just trying to figure out a long-term vision for SpireHelm and not just writing to write. Because right now I think we're going lore first, and then writing, and then hopefully art, I think is kind of the current, like what people are wanting to do. But I don't think that's the most sustainable for the future of SpireHelm. Okay, we've gotten pretty sidetracked, but let's put this down here. Just gonna bump these up a little bit. Do we think lore is one of those things that is actually pretty important? Or is it like, or does that go under collaboration? I don't know. I think I'm saying for people wanting to get into dark fantasy content, we are there for, what are we here for is the real question. What am I here for, and what are you guys here for, and what are new people going to be here for? Because believe it or not, we're actually just at the beginning of this project. Like, we had a huge amount of growth in a couple of weeks and months, but that was at the very, very beginning of stuff. We're not actually that far in, and I hope as we go future, it'll keep growing, and that newcomers will have an easier time than all of you guys did. You guys are the vets. You guys are the guinea pigs of the experiment. But if somebody's coming here and they go, I love dark fantasy retro, I loved those AI slideshows, I wish there was stuff that wasn't AI that was coming out that I could be a part of, because we all missed it. We weren't even born when this stuff was happening. We wish, for nostalgia's sake, we're here for the vibes and the nostalgia. And then on top of that, we could offer collaboration. I'm here for the collaboration. Some people like to get into stuff just for the lore. Some people start reading Warhammer just to get into the lore, because there's so much of it that you can just keep digging forever and find everything you would ever want to find. I think there's a chance that this is one of those core things that people would be looking to SpireHelm for. And Warhammer is one of those IPs that's way too ambitious for what we can do currently. But it is one of those IPs where no matter what you're interested in, if we were to make one for Warhammer, it would have interaction at the table, playing with friends, community. It would have lore. You could just read for days. You got the vibes of sci-fi, fantasy. In each one of the chapters of Space Marines are all different like vibes. Some of them are like the Crusader Knights. Some of them are like pharaohs from Egypt and sorcerers, and you have the orcs that are kind of these like hunga bunga, hit things hard, blow things up, red makes me go faster, all those type of things. And you have Tau, which are like super high tech space mechs. You have Adeptus Mechanicus, which is like almost steam but mostly like tech punk cyborg people. So you have like all these different mini genres, and whichever one you like, you can find. And I'm fine if SpireHelm turns into, well, I like it for the collaboration, well, I joined it for the lore, well, I joined it for the vibes. I'm okay if some people only do it for one of these three things. Those of you who are in the Discord and who are probably in this stream are probably here mostly for the collaboration and the lore. Most people who follow my TikTok, which I haven't uploaded for in forever, are probably here for the vibes. They probably don't care about collaboration, but they are technically just as important and just as prominent members of the community as those who are just here to read or who are just here to write and collaborate. And so I don't want to just prioritize, so currently we've just been prioritizing this, the world building in the archive and just creative writing. And the poor people over here who are here for the vibes aren't getting anything, which is the whole point. That's like one of the main points was retro dark fantasy content. And how do we get that? And what does that look like? So let me catch up. Let's see. The lore should be connected to collaborations and the personality. We are the niche veterans. Education's changed you. I loved the vibes of the AI slideshows. I don't love the fact that they were made with AI. That's the sad part. It's tragic. But I love the vibes, and I wish there was somebody out there who was really doing the cool stuff, and we could get some of that art and the vibes, you know. Am I going to start uploading TikTok? Yeah, I hope so. I don't have a ton, I don't have any videos pre-planned or edited or anything, but I am, after this stream, I'm hoping to have a roadmap to follow that will get us where we're going. Yeah, build the vibe by creating the Dark Fantasy lore. So yeah, that's probably actually a really good point. The vibe could come from the actual lore, and the lore will feed into the collaboration. It's just getting quite spaghettified, but here for the vibes. I love the art layout of the Ignis Specs document. Thank you. I loved the vibes and the art of it too, because that one took a lot of time, but it was very careful and thoughtful, and I tried to make it feel like an old school D&D book, because that's what the vibes are, an old school comic type of thing. Okay, simple or basics. I need to finish the frame, and that will help people in every area. It'll help with collaboration. It'll help with vibes. Does the simple or basic go into vibes or out of vibes? I don't actually know. Either way, this line is here. I don't know which direction it would go. Yeah, I think the most important, if I had to choose, vibes would be the most important. Then probably collaboration, then lore. And so then that asks the question, if the lore is coming from the collaboration, I don't know. Do you guys see where I'm kind of running into a roadblock here? It's a difficult thing to think about, because I think all of us, there's like this blue sky phase of production that a lot of people talk about at the very beginning, where you just have all these ideas and everything goes, everything can go. You don't throw out anything yet. And I think we're to the point now where we need to start saying no to things, and I'm probably gonna have to be the no guy that goes, sorry. And it's not in like a mean way, it's just in a, it's not sustainable and we just can't do this. And it's sad sometimes to have to say no to things, but yeah, it's gonna be one of those things where I'm gonna have to say, that lore just won't work, sorry. And luckily, like we talked about a little bit, is how the archive serves as a library. And so I watched this is gonna be a tangent. The library serves as a place where actual facts exist, and also myth and legend that people either believe is true or isn't true, and it's indistinguishable, or straight up fiction in their world that they wrote about a knight that went on a quest and fought this dragon. The dragon doesn't exist, the knight doesn't exist, none of it actually existed, but it inspires people to do those things. Just like we have books nowadays that are completely set in the real world of people going and doing completely plausible things heroically, whatever. But to them, the fantasy is real. But to us, it's not, I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways, I was watching a YouTube channel by Gavin the Medievalist, and he talked about medievalism as a concept and how there are two different sides of, there's the Middle Ages, which is actual history of what really happened during the Middle Ages. And there's a history, there are people who study the history. And then there is medievalism, which is our perception of the Middle Ages. And this ranges from Tangled and Rapunzel all the way to Game of Thrones to actual history. Lord of the Rings counts as this. SpireHelm counts as part of medievalism. It's taking place in these Middle Ages. But we don't have to distinguish entirely the two between real history. We look back at the medieval ages, and there are things like Beowulf and the works of Malory are some that he brought up that are these like romantic knights going on quests to save the Duchess, or these different things, and save the realm, even if there's no dragons or no anything. I think Beowulf has a dragon in it, or a beast, or a monster of some kind. And these were things that were written in the Middle Ages, that took place in the Middle Ages, but were a fantastical creation in the world. And then there's like the lore of King Arthur, Excalibur and the Sword and the Stone. Was King Arthur a real person? I think the historians think so. Was all of the legends that were told about him true? Definitely not. But did the people of his time believe those legends to be true? Yes. And so, like, in the archive, whether the lore is actual fact or not, it's real to the people. And even if it's ambiguous to the people, it's still important, if that makes sense. So I think drawing that distinction between the two is really important. Let's see. Yeah, the movies where all the townsfolk wear all brown and the cities are sad and ugly. Yeah, where all the castles are already ruined after, as if they've been there for thousands of years, even though they just built it. That kind of thing. Yeah, there's bits of that, and there's that side of things where people are like, oh, the dark and gritty ones are the more realistic ones, and there's people who are like, no, the more romantic stuff is the more realistic, and neither is probably true. And anybody who enjoys any aspect of fantasy or medievalism is all partaking in the same thing. They're just kind of picking and choosing which parts of it they like, and you end up with Lord of the Rings, and you end up with Game of Thrones, and you end up, it's all kind of, none of them are 100% accurate. And there are some people who really like the 100% accurate stuff, and there are some people who don't. And personally, I find it very interesting, but I don't love it. If I had to create my own thing, I'm going to do the fantasy. Like, this is the whole point of SpireHelm, is we're going to carve out our little portion of the medievalism and include the things from fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, and then include some of the stuff from retro 80s nostalgia, like D&D, animation, comics, stuff like that. You could look at what people write instead of saying no. You could just say yes to what fits inside your lore, and everything else is just legends. Yeah, that's kind of been the default. I should write the general lore, and then everybody else can kind of figure out everything else. Yeah, that's a good part. Okay. Just trying to think of where I need to go from here. Vibes. We want dark fantasy content, and we want a community around it based on collaboration, lore, and vibes. And maybe lore isn't the right way to say this. Maybe we just say content is probably the better way to say this, put this, which I guess is the whole point. I don't know. And then between that, I don't know how to do this. We have the lore, because the lore informs the content, but it is not the content. They are two different things. There's a big distinction between writing and lore that I think we often forget, and that's that more can be said, and maybe not more can be said. Lore is just the information. Writing is putting that information into something that is dramatic and what's the word? Digestible, something that like people actually want to read or watch or look at or do whatever with. And I think the priority should be more on writing than on lore. Because I think when you write lore, it just becomes a wiki with just information that people can find and learn about. But when you learn about it through dramatic writing, it's way more impressive. If you think about, the entire Lord of the Rings is a great example. Pretty much all of it is self-contained, and there are some things that he never explains. There are, when Gandalf in the book, I think, when he talks to the Balrog, he mentions that he's like some part of some order of the Protectors of the Flame or something. Not once does he ever touch on that ever again in the entire series, as far as I know. And that is okay. That we get an amount of depth to Gandalf when we go, oh, Gandalf is part of something bigger than him that he only brings up now. He never talked about it. He doesn't. It's not his first thing he introduces. He introduces himself as the wizard, not as the protector of the flame of Anor, I think is the name, and that's okay. And that adds depth to Gandalf without just writing down the protectors of the flame of Anor were a secret blah 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 of wizards who blah 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 blah. And I, no offense to any of the writers here, but a lot of the writing I've seen in the Discord is, I'm an archivist. I found this group of people. This group of people is blah 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 blah, which is lore, and that's not bad. The lore is fun. The lore is fun for people to make. It's not often that fun for people to read or digest. It's a lot cooler when the lore appears through dramatic storytelling, like Gandalf fighting the Balrog and going, oh, I'm the protector of the flame of Anor, and you shall not pass. And that's where you get that. Or like the flowers that grow in the graves of the kings of Rohan is a similar thing. It's not something that's explicitly stated why. There is no science behind it. It might not even be 100% true. It's just known that these flowers grow on the graves of the kings of Rohan. And I think things like that, that's writing. That's not lore, if that makes sense. There's a distinction there. And I don't know where to put that here, but it could go somewhere. Okay. Let's go to vibes for a minute. Traditional familiar archetypes, old school art. For Ollie, so like FE, I don't know, FE. Some monster species, for example, some monster species lore in a form of envelopes, researching papers, and stories being commented on and placed together by collectors is all right. Checking for a friend. I think so. I feel like that's more entertaining to read than just telling people everything up front. And I think part of that remains the mystery. Oh yeah, speaking of which, let's add that in here. I cannot spell. Wow. Let's try this again. Whoa, oh, my thumb's in the wrong spot, that's why. Mysterious. I think it kind of goes into the archetypes. So maybe let's add this. The realm. So I think some important things, this will kind of go back to the simple basic lore. We need to kind of establish what exactly SpireHelm should feel like, because I think the current problem that we've been talking about is that it's turning into a little bit too generic of a fantasy, and we've kind of ended up creating everything and nothing all at the same time. Gosh, I need to fill my water. So I'm gonna go fill my water really quick, and then I'll come back to talk about what the core tones and tenets and touchstones of SpireHelm should be going forward, and how I'm going to hopefully mix those into the lore basics so that when somebody comes, they can read 2 or 3 paragraphs and know, oh, I know whether or not this would fit in SpireHelm or this would not. So I'll be right back. I'm back. So, who else forgot about the Death Storms? I know. The Death Storms is one of those things that now that I've read Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds just like their freaking high storms. They're both called storms. They're Death Storms, high storms. Differences in Roshar, the high storms charge their Stormlight, which is kind of like their source of all of their magic, or at least pretty much all of their magic as far as I know in that world. I'm only on book 3, but by the end of book 3, you're supposed to kind of know everything you should need to know about the world. Which is crazy. You have to read 3,000 pages to understand like the normal stuff. Once again, it's great for a long series if you want to have tons of content to read. Not great for SpireHelm where you want to participate in the collaboration and stuff. Death Typhoons. I know, I guess we got to rebrand. There's some other stuff I mentioned or that I wrote down. Feels like Brandon Sanderson. Death Storms feel oddly reminiscent of the High Storms. I don't want to feel like I'm just copying him. I also had some ideas for imbued weapons that I feel like a little bit like his shards from Roshar as well. I had some ideas. I don't know if they're in here. The imbued in here or somewhere else? I don't even know. Imbued. No, well, it's just in that one. Okay. I had some ideas for future realm events that I guess I can spoil to the 12 of you here. For like imbued weapons that are basically weapons with a soul. So they have a memory of their existence, kind of, and they can communicate with the person who attunes to them in a way, but not through like written language. It's kind of like a non-written, like it's something you feel in your soul. So if you had a sword, if you go into a goblin's cave and you beat this troll or this dragon, you uncover this dragon's hoard, you might find a sword that looks to you like just a normal sword, and then after carrying it on your back for a week or two, you start to like have these weird feelings and thoughts, and you're like, what the heck is what's going on? And then you realize, oh, it's this sword, and you could eventually connect with it, and each sword has their own name. Their name is connected to the artificer who created them, and maybe the artificers probably, I would assume, are a past thing in this. It's another thing with Brandon Sanderson. Oh my gosh. I'll touch on that in a second. But anyways, you have these weapons that could possess certain abilities or are known for certain things. I mean, you look at the Lord of the Rings. I think Gandalf's sword is called Glamdring, which is like the Goblin Cleaver or the Foe Hammer. Sting has its own name, but Sting is just the name of the sword named by the person who made it, and they are known for their works, or like, you know, it has this ability to glow in the dark. Some of them are known as the Goblin Cleavers. I don't remember what the Goblin Cleaver is Thorin's, I think. But anyways, I had some ideas for kind of if we were to take that idea and push it and say, okay, well, what if when these artificers imbued these weapons with semi-sentience, what if they carried that on? I don't know. You have an ability to craft a story not around a person, but now you have an ability to craft a story around a weapon or a tool, a hammer, or, you know, a saddle or a cloak. All these different things that could be imbued. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. It was kind of on the back burner, but then I was like, oh man, these shards in Roshar, the shards possess like these spren, which are like these spirits. And then when they break a bond, the spirit dies, but you can still use the sword. It just has like a dead soul in it. So now I'm like, gosh dang it, that's another thing that Brandon Sanderson thought of at the same time, or earlier than I thought of it, but I hadn't read his stuff, so I didn't know that me thinking of it was the same thing. And then on top of that, they have these things called desolations, where every time a desolation comes through, every couple thousand years or whatever, civilization gets wiped out, and so there's this period of regrowth, and they look back on these past ages of knowledge, and they go, how did they know all these things? We had to start back at like the Bronze Age again, or the Stone Age, and then regrow as a civilization, and because all the knowledge was lost. And I'm like, gosh dang it. This is the whole thing with SpireHelm was supposed to be that there was an age past with knowledge, and that the whole point of the archive was to find this lost knowledge from ages past. And yet we've got high storms, or we've got death storms that are basically high storms, and we've got this knowledge of ages past. So I'm like, gosh dang, I don't want it to feel and I had a friend, one of the guys who's been helping me on SpireHelm, he mentioned like, yeah, it kind of feels a lot like Brandon Sanderson. I was like, what? I've only started his first book. I don't know. And then I've read them all, and I'm like, gosh dang, it's so it's not really that close. But to an onlooker, they might say, is this just like a reskinning of Brandon Sanderson stuff? But it's not. And the whole point of it is different. The premise is sci-fi fantasy versus traditional dark fantasy. I don't know. X is Y centimeters tall. Um, yeah, measurement through comparison. The other thing too that I thought of is like not overcomplicating things. I know with Lord of the Rings, Tolkien frames the Lord of the Rings as a manuscript that he or someone translated to English, like a found record that was translated from what they were called. Like Frodo's real name is something. What is Frodo's real name? It's not even called Frodo. Mara Labingi or Labingi is Frodo's real name, and yet he says he translated it kind of into this like old English. And so similarly, he uses months, he uses miles maybe, or I think he uses miles because it's like it's England basically, or the UK or Europe. It's an alternate version of Europe, and so I'm totally fine with people just using inches, centimeters. I don't know, maybe we should standardize it to one or the other, but I'm totally fine with months being just the first month, the 12th month, the whatever. We have the moons that we talked about, but I think that's kind of a more advanced thing that, once again, to a newcomer, if they want to write stuff, I just wanted to be able to say, like, oh, yeah, the only thing you have to know is just the years. What year are we in? What are these ages? And those will line up differently compared to, obviously, us, because this is a completely different realm. We're not. Anyways, speaking of the realm, we're going to talk about the realm. So let's talk about the realm. Some core tenets that I think need to be here. Where the heck did it go? Where's my magic stuff? Am I crazy? Ah, oh, here we go. Okay. Good to know. Let me open up that down here. It was just in a different place. Tons and tenets. There we go. Okay, so let's go old school art really quick, just because this one will be quick. We got Rosetta as an example. Rosetta is my current favorite for old school art. He kind of pioneered the genre with Conan the Barbarian, the Deathbringer, and stuff like that. Perfect. Okay, so the realm should be, these are things that I think everyone expects to be there, and that we should always be touching base with when we're writing or thinking of stuff or whatever. I think these are things that, like, if you're missing, if it doesn't feel like this, it's probably not SpireHelm. It's probably a different fantasy, and you should just go write a book because you have great ideas and they're great for fantasy, but they're probably just not the greatest for SpireHelm. So obviously, magical, mystic, I guess we could put in there as well. Mystic. That's not what I wanted. Mysterious. This is one of the biggest ones that I think we could probably focus on a bit more, is just that a lot of things feel too known. And I think if you think back, like there's a sense of adventure and questing that was like the whole world is just unknown. We just, not we, the knights, the characters, the heroes of these books, they know they know the known stuff, but everything else is just unknown. They know where the kingdom is, they know who the king is, they know where the safe spots are, they know the main rivers and mountains, and everything else is just completely mysterious to them. So I think that's a big one that we should probably try a little bit harder on. Speaking of which, scary. The world is a dangerous place, and nothing is safe. The implication is if you are outside of the kingdom of SpireHelm, if you are outside of the city of SpireHelm, you are in grave danger and probably won't make it back alive if you venture off of these set couple of trade routes that are very specific and very safe. And even on those, there may be bandits or goblins or other creatures that will find you and hunt you down or whatever. So, scary goes right hand in hand with dangerous. Oops, heroic. Oh, we can change the color of these things? What? That's cool. It's my first time using this feature on Obsidian. It's like, I think it's relatively new, but it's great. Heroic and unexplored. So one of the main things that I think will have to be one of the core tenets of SpireHelm that I touched on in the main lore document, I think, is that there is rampant growth and chaos. Obviously, it's your traditional, once again, we go back to the traditional archetypes. We have chaos and order, good, evil. Like these are the main pushes and pulls of the world. And with this, the growing evil manifests as growing chaos. And so you have forests that are being overgrown, places that are being overrun and then lost to this, like, I wouldn't even call it like a, I don't even know, like the realm in and of itself is mystic. It's not reality. There is no science that can analyze and figure things out. There is only the realm, and the realm itself is magic, if that makes sense. And so, like, the realm can shift and morph and change. The Ignispecs are a perfect example of that. They are a manifestation of the realm's mysticism, where they appear and disappear on a whim. An entire castle could appear in the forest one day and you find an Ignispecs in there, and then the next day it's gone. Or there's a tower, you know, whatever it is, there's these bits of unknowableness to the realm. And so there are things that can be counted on, obviously. The Kingdom of SpireHelm is not going to disappear overnight. But there are some things about the realm that are just, maybe that were once thought reliable, that are no longer reliable in this age of coming darkness that will hopefully inevitably come back to an end, and will be the realm will be saved. And that's what the heroes, the collectors, and the other knights of the realm, their job is to save the realm. Like to protect the last bits of humanity or civilization, if it's dwarves, elves, humans, whatever. It's not just humans, but it's, you know, the good, the order that's been set up and that is good. All that is good, the heroes are there to protect. And then underneath that, you have a little bit of like, well, what if the good things that you're protecting also have some alternative motives? You know, there's, you know, that's how politics works. You know, things are worth fighting for, but then some people take advantage of those good things that are worth fighting for, and you end up in questionable situations. But that shouldn't be the focus. The focus of this is not, you know, good versus evil kingdom politics. The point is heroism, danger, mystery, magic. And so maybe we should go, let's go heroic. We had to order these. I don't know why it's trying to do that. Let's go dangerous first, then unexplored. And maybe we can just cut, scary probably is redundant. I think dangerous and scary are pretty similar. Let me catch up on chat. Would the city of SpireHelm have settlements and colonies across the realm, or is all people living within the city? We'll talk about that in just a second. We make the Dark One feel more like an evil god instead of like maybe we make the TDO, the Dark One feel, the Dark Ones feel more like an evil god instead of the devil chaos. Yeah. Angels instead of orcish. Evil angels. Oh, instead of orcish armies. That, yeah. Silent evil. Unknown evil, corrupting the world, and the word storm. Yeah. Yeah, it could be. And maybe we change the storm to the, yeah. I don't know exactly how it will work. But some manifestation of evil will. I like the idea of having very, very real threats of just death and ends of certain civilizations. Like the point of the Death Storm was it would sweep across, kill everything in its path. So maybe we have like things erupt out of the ground around villages or forests, and it just consumes, and then nothing is left, and then from there things can pick back up, that kind of thing. Would the city of SpireHelm have settlements and colonies? Yes, but they would be small. I think going back to, I know we talked about it a little bit on the other streams, but going back to the simple lore basics, the realm needs to have one kingdom. Everything here, there, I don't know how to explain this. I mean, I think medievalism is a good way to look at it. Back in the day, before we had cross-continental travel, like even the English Channel was pretty much as far as the medievalism, the history of Britain and whatever. I mean, there was castles in France and whatever, but it's like England or like the UK and France and Germany, like that little portion of Europe is like the entire world to them. They knew of places like Egypt, Shore, and other places, but like for the most part, the day-to-day life of a kingdom in Great Britain was your realm, your little land, and that's it. You weren't worried about what was happening in, in China, because China was in a completely different age and a different era. They had their own kingdoms and whatever. But that gets into samurai fantasy, and you have these other, it's starting to branch out. We want to suck it back into the traditional dark fantasy, which is primarily early European, Germany, France, UK, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, that kind of thing. Obviously, it's not taking place there. Our realm is different, but that's the fantasy that people know and associate with those type of things. And so that's kind of, the Crusades, that's kind of an example. Like they go all the way across to Jerusalem and whatnot. But like, the Mediterranean was like kind of its own little world for a while. Like I know there were lots of empires in the world that were about expanding, and they were pushing for an expansion. Rome, Byzantine Empire, the Crusades, all of those things kind of pushing the limits of their realm. With SpireHelm, we won't have that problem because there is, to us, there is nothing else. We don't have to create something else. We don't have any obligation of history. Like we don't work within the bounds of reality. We can make it whatever we want. And so for us, we don't have any other realms. There is just SpireHelm, and their biggest struggle is not resisting other human or civilized kingdoms invading them. It's resisting the dark, evil, god, magic, whatever, that's constantly assailing them and trying to tear down their civilization. And so it makes things much more clear cut. There's a black and white. That's not like, because you could argue, like, oh, was the Roman Empire bad for conquering things? And it's like, oh, maybe and maybe not. And, you get into all these like ethics and morals, and that's not very fun. It is important, obviously, but that's like what the real world is for. Fantasy is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be an escape from the real world and politics and ethics and morals. Not that ethics and morals don't exist, but it's very easy. Good and bad. There is evil and there is good. And if you're part of the realm, you're good. If you're SpireHelm, you're good. Typically, obviously, it's the wide brushstroke of, if you're fighting for the realm, you're good. If you're fighting for the Dark One, you're evil. Just like Lord of the Rings, it makes things a lot more simple. People can put in nuance wherever they want, but like that's the easiest way for things to go. Is there's good magic, there's bad magic, and there's good people, there's bad people. We don't have to worry about being conquered by, while the Dark One came, he was about to arrive at SpireHelm, and then another kingdom came in and took over SpireHelm while you weren't watching, while you're distracted, and right after the war happened and all of your guys were dead. We don't have to worry about that. So we can leave that out. Redwall series. I've never heard of it, actually. Okay, so we've got this. I think I can make a group out of this. Create group. Boink. Ah, sweet. Oh, not that. Not that. No. Core tenets. There we go. Magic should reflect people and no one is just good or bad. Yeah, I mean, there's differences of like no one is purely good and no one's perfect. There is no like arbiter of perfection and good and evil. I mean, the idea is that to the people, which is that kind of gets back into what is actually happening in SpireHelm versus what the writing will contain. And to the people of SpireHelm currently, Alythius is the paragon of good and light and hope, power, whatever, all of those things. And so to the people, he represents that. Whether or not he is perfect, good, a good king, whatever, you can get into that wherever you want. But for the sake of the writing, he is the representation of all that is good in the realm and all that is worth fighting for SpireHelm. The city of SpireHelm itself represents that. The archive, once again, represents this accumulation of knowledge, trying to find everything and in order to protect the realm, supposedly or potentially, whatever. Whether or not the archive is entirely good is obviously not true, because they're willing to do some things to cover up their tracks or to keep people safe. They're willing to do morally ambiguous or evil things. Maybe not evil, but bad things, So it kind of gets into that. But for the sake of the fantasy, that's where there kind of is good people, bad people. And if people want to take their writing in other ways, they totally can. But for the core tenets, let's can I do this? Oh, I love it when shortcuts from other applications carry over. That's a Adobe Illustrator shortcut. Good versus evil. We'll put that one in there. Okay. That's another thing about magic. Maybe we pull some of these out. Let me get back to this. I made some notes. Art style, mood, adventure. So let's pull each of these out a little bit. Yeah, let's do this. Actually, I don't even know. Get rid of this for now. Let's do magic. The goal is unexplored. Should SpireHelm be more of a New World, West March idea? I think functionally it is, but canonically it isn't, if that makes sense. They're not like new to the realm. It's just that the realm has changed so much. And maybe this is like one of those things that I've been thinking about, and then I'm probably gonna have to go rewrite some of the lore about, which I'll do hopefully, soon here. Maybe we do it next stream. I don't know if I'll be here Monday or Tuesday next week or sometime. But kind of re-going over the lore and with hopefully this in mind and going, okay, does this fit? Does this not? Is this doable? Is this realistic? Does this make any sense? Yeah. How does magic work in SpireHelm? That's a great question, which is part of the problem I think we've been having, is that I think a lot of fantasy, people come to a new fantasy with the idea, they're here for the vibes, they're here for from archetypes, they're here for cool magic. That's like one of the things that people are there for. And that will go there. And that'll go here. The problem is with, don't even get people started on how magic works. Exactly. I don't want to get anyone started on how magic works, because magic just works. One of the critiques I've heard of Brandon Sanderson is that, and the one that I stand by, is that once you understand magic too much, it becomes science. If we looked at, like, people thought the stars were gods back in the day, because, and the planets, they thought the planets were gods because all the stars moved like this, and there was a couple stars that would do this, and they'd retrograde, and they'd keep going. And they'd go, that star wasn't there yesterday, and now it's there. And so they would go, these must be gods. And that was magic to them. Nowadays, we look at it and we go, oh, the reason, it's because the Earth's not the center of everything, bro. The Earth is going around the sun and they're all going around us. So we see them swiggle back and forth around us. And it's not perfect because the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. And so now it's science. And that gets kind of boring for fantasy. In Brandon Sanderson's books, Stormlight, this investiture is like one of the things that fuels all of their magical stuff. But the problem is once you use, I mean, you could look at gasoline as magic. If you brought gasoline, modern gasoline, to a caveman and said, look, pour this in a pot and light it on fire and watch what happens, it burns for, I don't know how long, probably not that long, but it would burn, you know? And nowadays we go, oh, we can just put it in an engine and these pistons. You look at an iPhone, and my iPhone's my camera. If you look at modern technology, you show them a square tablet that you can draw on and watch videos on and that you can talk with someone across the world in. That's magic. That's straight up witchcraft. But to us, it's just technology, it's just science. And I feel like Brandon Sanderson, the Stormlight, in some areas, not everywhere, but in some areas starts to feel like just science. Like they just, oh, we use it to communicate across the world. We use it to, you measure these different things. We do all these different whatever. And at that point, it just kind of becomes science. And so for SpireHelm, something I want to stick to is that magic is unknowable and mystic in nature. It's myth. It's not, I don't know if there's any better way to explain it. It's not knowable. It's not scientific. And some people are going to argue, oh, well, hard and soft magic systems, and you need a hard magic system. We don't need a hard magic system. Hard magic systems didn't exist until D&D. And the reason that it existed for D&D is because D&D is a game that has rules that has to fit. You can't just have somebody say, well, I'm just going to cast fireball for no reason. And you're like, well, you're not even a wizard. You're a rogue. Well, but magic exists, right? And so I think that's where the hard magic comes from. And since then, I think there are things that benefit from hard magic systems, and there are things that benefit from soft magic. And whether or not that's even the only dichotomy, I don't know if it's a dichotomy. There might be a bigger three-dimensional spectrum of magic systems and where they fit. I just know that SpireHelm, for its sake, for a collaborative writing project, we cannot do hard magic systems. We should not be doing hard magic systems. There's just too many rules that you'd have to, edge cases and all these different things. That's for game design. And if we were ever to make a TTRPG, then we can get into, okay, we know how the magic looks. Now let's figure out how it fits into the game. Whatever. But that's not what we're doing. We're doing creative writing primarily. And for creative writing, you can do whatever fits the story. Whatever is the most cool and whatever sounds and fits, whatever, that's what you should be doing. Because if it serves these elements, does it encourage mystery, heroism, good versus evil, whatever. There is no more power scaling in SpireHelm. I mean, we know of things like power. It's kind of the same thing when people try to power scale Lord of the Rings. They're like, oh, well, Gandalf or Legolas or Aragorn and Legolas, and like, but Aragorn has the powers of a king. There are moments where he's able to heal in the books, I think. I don't think they really touch on it in the movies, but there's moments where the king is known to have healing abilities, which is something that comes from medievalism and King Arthur. He had a blessing of healing that he could give to people that would heal them, and not for having learned it at a school. It's not an incantation. It's not an item that he possesses. It's the fact that he is king. People understand the king heals people. The king can do this stuff. And so that's kind of what I want the magic to feel like. So I haven't typed anything in 10 minutes. Let's get into this. So magic is unknowable. Mostly. It's not that magic isn't familiar to people. It's that magic can't be quantified. I'm not opposed to people learning magic. I don't want magic to be something that is, once again, for somebody to write, to come in here and say, I want to participate in the writing. I don't want them to have to say, oh, I need to learn the whole magic system first. I don't think that's super productive or helpful. Let's get to here. Magic is So magic is the force that affects the realm outside of understanding. This, I think, is a helpful touchstone as well. If they understand it, it's probably not magic. However, I don't know if it's Tolkien or someone else. Somebody touched on, I don't remember where I heard this. I heard it from some channel. I don't remember. But there's a quote from somebody saying magic is what the other people do. And I think that's a good idea to have for, if we understand it, it's just what happens. It's just reality to us. But if you see somebody else doing their magic, to you, you think that's magic. That's witchcraft, because that's what they do. To us, like if I brought this iPad to the witch trials, they would say, that's magic, that's witchcraft, burn him. Because it's what I do. But to us, it's just normal. And I think similarly, magic should be the thing that is outside of the understanding. If it's, oh yeah, that just kind of happens, it's just magic. We know how it happens. It's just because of the position of the sun and the stormlight and all these different things, that kind of gets a little bit, and it's not, I don't know, this is really hard to explain. Magic can do things a person can't. Yep, that's a great way of saying it. Magic can be something that's familiar. Like when Gandalf comes with his fireworks, Gandalf's just a fireworks guy. Gandalf can just do things. He can just light his staff and make it into a light. And while that is magic, it is just the thing that the magicians do. It's just the thing that the wizards do. And so I think it's fine to be like, oh yeah, you go to the Ignis Specs, they'll tell you the thing. It's like, well, how do they read the flames? And you go, no. They just do. But we know we can consistently count on the magic working. That's different than science. But how the magic works, it's not, we can draw connections between things. Oh, well, they burned, I don't know, they burned your childhood journal, so it gave you a prophecy about your future, or it told you something about your past. Versus if you brought them mine, it would be much less specific. And you go, that's interesting. That's not necessarily trying to understand the magic. That's just trying to apply the magic, if that makes sense. You can't learn to swim like a fish, and they can't explain how, they just do it. Yep, they just breathe oxygen. And we just know that fish don't need to breathe air. They can breathe the oxygen through the water. And most people back in, quote unquote, the medieval ages, where this is not really taking place, but kind of taking place, they wouldn't have known that oxygen was even the thing that you breathed. But they know there are things that live underwater, and there are things that don't live underwater. And the things that don't live underwater usually can't live underwater forever. They die. And they have names for these things, and they can consistently count on them, and they might even learn, oh, well, it's because they somehow get what we get from the air, from the water. And you go, okay. And that's kind of it. You can count on things working how you understand them, but that's different than science and hard magic systems, where it's like, well, if you do this thing like this, then this. That's a little bit too much like D&D. But I'm not opposed to spell books. At the same time, I like the idea of like, oh, well, if you want to do this thing, this magic, collect 3 rat skulls, crush up some bay leaves, mix them in a pot of maple syrup, and boil it for 5 minutes, and then say these words, and this thing will happen. That's still magic. I think that still works. That still fits into what we're going for here. But I think these two is a good way to start. Add a card. Whoops. Spire. Yeah, it's not a thing that they bank their lives on. Magic is not something that they rely on, I think, is a big thing. Not for civilization, at least. An introduction book to SpireHelm, similar to the Ignis Specs book. Yeah, I think that's probably what I should do next. I think once I get the lore written, I should make a couple pieces of art, a cover, some good stuff, and yeah, probably publish it like that. So an example of relying on it for civilization, we have the internet. It's what we rely on for banking, for money, for communication, for business. Everything nowadays is reliant on the internet, but we understand it. We use it all the time. However, I don't think that's how they would use science. They would interact with it often, and they may rely on it for combat. Say, like, if you're a collector or something, you've learned a couple protection spells or defensive spells like a fireball. That's something you can rely on to save your life, but it's not something that, like, it's not the backbone or the foundation of civilization. Civilization exists outside of magic, and you interact with it here and there. It's not flying. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it any differently than that. Yeah, it's not necessarily. I don't think it's a everybody does magic kind of place. I think that's another thing about the. I think it's actually a probably. Whoops. I think that's something that would probably go here. Is magic is not accessible to the average spire folk. That kind of goes here. Yeah, magic isn't accessible to the average spire folk. I think is if you think back to dark fantasy, retro dark fantasy, which is what we're going for. We're trying to find this vibe. The traditional archetype is that the heroes, the characters, are familiar with the fact that magic exists, but they don't understand it entirely. They interact with it here and there, and may be able to access it to a small degree. But the main characters, the heroes, the archivists, whatever, collectors, are not the ones who have unlimited access to magic. Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings is basically a god. He was there during the creation of Middle-earth. He is like so outside of the rest of the main characters. To the rest of them, there are bits of magic that the dwarves get. There are bits of magic that the elves get. There are bits of magic that the hobbits and the men have. Even I guess the men don't really have almost any magic. I mean, a little bit. They have like the healing and some things like that, and legends and myth, whatever. But for the most part, it's things that they access. There's Sting, which is a magical weapon that Bilbo then gets access to, and then Frodo and whatever. The elves give Sam this bottle of starlight, which to Sam is magic because it's what the other people do. I don't know how this even works, but this has a star in it. And that's something that he gets access to and can use, but it's not something that he invented or came up with. The Ignispecs is one of those things. They are basically pure bits of magic and sorcery in the world that people have access to and can use and can rely on here and there somewhat, but they're not the things that they do. It's the parts of it that they interact with. So is there mana as something tangible? That's one where I feel like it gets a little bit into the realm of hard magic systems that I want to stay away from. So my first instinct is no. But there may be an exception to that somewhere. Is it possible to study? I think it is possible to study. I don't know. It's one of those hard things where it's like, well, how do you become a wizard? Because I like the idea of there being wizards and mages. Once again, kind of rare. Not as rare as Gandalf, but here and there, there's a dark wizard in a dark tower, or there's a light wizard who will, I don't know, do healings in SpireHelm or something. And so how does the next guy train to be? I like the idea of an apprentice, sorcerer's apprentice kind of vibe, where it's like you can study some parts of magic. And I just think the magic should stay on that side of you study it and you understand it from someone who can teach you. And maybe it is one of those like you just feel it, but you have to have somebody guide you to be able to feel the right things. Yeah, I don't know. I think archetypically, stereotypically, the magic uh, the magic can be learned by wizards. That's kind of how they do it. Mana as a residue to magic, like an aura, not a main fuel bar or a mana fuel bar. Yeah, I think the other thing too is I like the idea of there being different types of magic. Um, let me um, let me do a couple more things. Magic isn't a force. Not a force they control, but one that they interact with. I think that kind of goes to here. And the gods and the veterans, that's another one where I'll have to probably rewrite some stuff. I don't know how much, but this one probably goes up here. Oops, magic is not entirely consistent. So this one, what I'm not trying to say here is that fireball doesn't always do fireball. What I'm saying is that some types of magic may be lost or reveal themselves again or reveal themselves for the first time as the realm changes. I don't think that changes anything. That's just kind of how things work. Lastly, oh yeah, to go back to, I think it was Ollie, yeah. With the magic and magic sources, I only want magic source. I do want magic sources. I'll say that first. Magic comes from sources. However, I only want the magic sources to be understood in so much as you can connect them together, but not like a mana bar. Well, if the stars are aligned perfectly, stars is hard because that's kind of what makes stars cool, is the alignment and the procession and all these different things. What am I trying to say? We take Elden Ring, for example. I think Elden Ring is a good example of this. Even for a game that has you could say hard magic because you can't make a spell do something different than whatever is in the game code. But the magic in Elden Ring is pretty soft in some ways because you know where the magic source comes from, and that's kind of it. There are sorceries and there are incantations, and they behave slightly differently. And within the sorceries, there are glintstone sorceries that draw their power from glintstone. There is no calculation for how much glintstone you need to cast certain things. You just cast it with glintstone, and you can assume more glintstone or an area like the Academy of Raya Lucaria is built on top of glintstone caves and crystals, like a huge amount of them. So you would assume, being built there, they are then more likely to have better magic power or more powerful. That's okay. Having more glintstone equals more magic. That's totally fine. Then you have the Carians, who have a Carian sorcery that pulls their stuff from the stars. And as the stars and the moon shift and change, their power ebbs and flows. So you can assume when it's a full moon, you're going to get more power. When it's a new moon, you might get more power. When it's a waxing or whatever, you might get less power. Or when the stars align or the planets or whatever. That's okay. And I think that's where the sources should come from. You should go, oh, your magic comes from fire. If there's fire around, you're going to be stronger. Or when you light a fire, whatever. Your magic comes from the elements. You're in the forest. You're in nature. Your powers are going to be stronger versus when you're in a city. Or if yours come from trees, when you're in a swamp, you're going to be, or a desert, your powers are less. One of these type of things where it's not like, well, if you do this, then, and it's all like predicated on how much of these different things you have to be able to cast these different things, or spell slots, stuff like that. I just don't think is super conducive to what we're trying to do. But sources being drawn and saying this magic comes from here and this magic comes from here, I think that's totally fine and should be probably encouraged. Because I think that's what makes magic accessible, is knowing where the magic comes from, not necessarily how the magic works. I don't know if that's an important distinction. Different magic sources, people use these magics in different ways, 100%. The Ignis specs are kind of their own thing, but they use fire. Doesn't mean that's the only fire magic that could exist. But maybe they have a special type of fire. We don't know. We just know that the Ignis specs flames lets them see things that other people can't see. Don't be messing with a caster whose power comes from air. Yeah. I don't know how to summarize this in anything simple because I don't want to spend too much time on this. Magic sources. I don't even know how to. I'll add this here. This is something I'll write in my own time. Where power comes from. And some people can just do magic without a source. I think that's another thing. Like the King of SpireHelm has a level of magic that other people don't have for no explainable reason. It's a myth. This is all like, it's real, but it's mythological, if that makes sense. So his power can literally just be his power, and that's it. Like, it doesn't have to come from anywhere. It doesn't have to have a source. It's not sourcing it from his followers or his people. He is the rightful heir to the throne. That's like Aragorn. He has this, I think he's part elf, which is why he can live for so long, the Dunedain, or whatever, the Numenor. I don't remember which one he is. But either way, it's one of those things that, like, we don't have to explain every piece of magic. But for some, if you want to explain it, if it helps, once again, if it serves these core tenets, if it serves these things that people are here for, then put it in. If you think it's going to take away from these things by being mysterious, if letting people know about where the source of this magic comes from takes away the mystery or the danger or the expectation, the unexplored, whatever, then just don't put it. Just leave it out. And that's totally fine. I will not. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I will never get mad at somebody for doing that. Let me make this one red so I come back to it. Okay, that's one. I don't know how many of these we're going to do, but magic is one of those really important ones. The Fey Docs, a collector did a report on a dead Fey, and after cutting it up, they found mana residue in their veins. I'm trying to think. I feel like that's one of those that, like, it depends. Because if for those type of, if that, for that type of magic, if that magic comes from their ancestry, their blood, like if that's what makes them magical, it's just something that all of those Fey creatures have, I think that's fine. If it's something that they ate, or is the mana residue a manifestation of them using magic or accessing magic? Is it a result of them using magic, or is it the thing that gives them magic? I don't know. Just came up with a new type of magic. Thanks. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's probably fine. Because I think that's one of those things that's like, if somebody, cuts them open and they're like, oh, look at this. Other creatures don't have this. This must be magical. That sounds great. And whether it's, I don't know if it really matters. I think that sounds fine as is. As long as, once again, if it's not restrictive and saying like, well, only if you have this certain type of plant that you eat, and then the mana. But I'm not like I don't know how to explain this. There's such a fine line of. It's not even a fine line. It's just a really big gray area in the middle. There's hard magic, like it's too hard, and there's soft magic that's maybe too soft. And all this area in the middle isn't really a fine line. It's just kind of like where along it. And I think the most important thing is it serving the vibes? The vibe, like we put, the vibes is technically the number one thing up here, and everything else should fall under that. So if it's serving the vibes and you feel like it's helping, feed into these traditional archetypes, if you can visualize it in a cool art form that feels like, oh yeah, this is something I would see in these old school books, if it feels like cool magic, whatever, if it adds personality to the realm without just adding extra unique stuff just for the sake of uniqueness, then probably. Any thoughts on houses, nobility, civics, trade, customs, holidays, etc.? It tends to be the world building I engage with more than magic. Good to know. Yeah, that is. I don't know how to respond to that. I do need to establish more of the houses, or maybe not houses, but like the nobility and the workings of SpireHelm is something that I definitely need to pick up on more. Um, there are some things that shouldn't be mysterious. I think that's the let's actually that's a good point. Let's do this. The realm. Where is this connected to? There we go. Let's do SpireHelm. So SpireHelm is the kingdom. That's pretty much it. It is the kingdom and the realm. I know we've used kind of some names that might be a little bit confusing, like, oh, well, SpireHelm is, or is it the shadow, what do we call it? The shadows of SpireHelm, or is it the Shadowlands, or is it the whatever? It's to them, to the people. Once again, like we're not writing lore. There may be a different name for the world. I had an idea for a different name when I first started this whole thing a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it changed. And I said, you know what, that doesn't really fit. SpireHelm feels more fitting. Because once again, SpireHelm sounds like a name, sounds like a place that could be one of these things. For these people, the realm to them is SpireHelm. To them, fighting evil means saving the whole realm. The known world to them is everything. And so it means eradicating evil from everywhere. And so there is a distinction, obviously, between SpireHelm the place, the city, you get city, whatever, not like a metropolis, but it's a city. And then there's a distinction between that and SpireHelm the realm. But people may use them using the same word, SpireHelm. It's like, I don't know. I mean, you think about it like, I don't know how big the realm is, but you could say like, I'm going to DC or I'm going to New York. You say you're going to New York, it means the city, also the state, but also you could be going to Queens, which isn't technically Manhattan. You could be going to Brooklyn. You could be going to all these different boroughs, but it's all New York. Or you could be saying, oh no, I'm going to like New York City. Like that's the city. I'm going to SpireHelm. I'm going to, you know, the I don't know if it's the fortress, the building, whatever. Zodiac. I don't know if Zodiac. I don't know where Zodiac will fit in the echelon of lore. First look lore. I don't even know if that's a good essential lore. Deep lore. And then I think everything else that's been written. I think these are kind of like the levels. And if you think about it, it's kind of like the main area, the Liber Selecti, and then in a way it's like this, you know, there's levels. There's genuinely levels to this. Um so I feel like Zodiac would be something that's kind of in this somewhere between deep lore and everything else. One of those things that, like, once again, this is the stuff that needs to be canonized. This stuff probably doesn't need to be. Maybe some of the deep lore, but once again, like, I like staying away from the word canonized or needing to be canonized. So I don't know. Thoughts on religions that aren't the main ones and don't follow the other gods. I think that would fall under everything else. I think for sake of simplicity, there will be two religions. Think about it kind of like Warhammer, where it's like, oh, obviously Warhammer has tons of factions, but for the Empire of Man, Imperium of Man, there is the Emperor and there is Chaos, and those are pretty much to the realm. If SpireHelm was the Emperor and Alythius was the God Emperor or whatever, then to them there is only the correct religion and then chaos. That's it. However, there's differing levels. So maybe to the realm, everything else, a religion worshiping something else would be considered maybe under the Dark One and chaos, but maybe it wouldn't. But for the essential lore, it would be there are those who fight for the kingdom of SpireHelm, and there are those who serve the Dark One for his power. But other groups definitely exist. It's not like there is no other religions. It's just that to SpireHelm, those are probably the religions. And maybe even within the kingdom of SpireHelm, there are, subgroups of religious people who worship different gods more specifically or in different ways or whatever. I'm not opposed to that. I don't know if that makes sense. It's not that there's not a no. You can definitely write. Once again, you can write whatever you want. Extreme denominations count. Yeah, I think kind of in that same vein of like branching off of things. Because if you look at the chapters in Warhammer, each one has their own god, their own Primarch that's like, and they all worship in different ways. They have their own relationship to him with Sanguinius and some of the others. And the Chaos guys are kind of the same way. They're all over the place. And then there's like, I'm trying to think of a good example from Warhammer. I don't know Warhammer well enough, but there's there's entirely other entities like the Tau who I don't know if they have a religion, but they serve their kind. And then there's like the Tyranids and the Gene Stealers and all of them. There's the Eldari, which probably have their own religion. They're like the elves, whatever. So kind of, I think it just kind of goes in the everything else has been written. There is stuff out there, and that's stuff that people can write about. I just think from my publishing, whatever you want to call it, from the lore that I'm going to write, I will only be touching on the realm of SpireHelm and the main gods, and one or two other sects of those that serve the Dark One explicitly, and those who are in a way fueling the Dark One because they are not serving the realm explicitly, if that makes sense. Avians who worship bird gods, they recognize the versions of the conduits. Yeah, like that could totally fit in. I think that's just, yeah, it's one of those things that like goes everywhere else, where it's like, oh, we found there are these people in the realm that worshipped birds, and now the conduits are here, and they're like, oh yeah, that's good too. We'll throw them in there or whatever. It's just kind of one of those things that like, it's not something that I would want someone to have to read in the essential lore before getting started. They wouldn't have to know about, these other groups of people or subgroups of the main, I don't know if you call it religion, but yeah, like the main religion that worships the Venerants, or the conduits. I don't think I'd touch on those. I think I'd just say there is those that worship the conduits, and then the deep lore is, oh, well, who are the conduits? And then you look into, oh, well, I didn't know this about this group and this group, whatever. It's the essential lore is there are good guys, and there's the realm, and there is the Dark One. And the deep lore is, Well, the Dark One actually is a little bit more nuanced. There is some different versions of who is closer to the Dark One. Do they even know they're serving the Dark One, or do they think they're serving some other vampire or warlock or whatever? There are the conduits. They each have their own sect of people, kind of like that. So, also, I don't know if you guys can hear my dog, but he's about to start snoring and sleep talking. When he's dreaming. So, if you hear that in the background, that's just Zuko. Okay, does that kind of make sense? We got sidetracked from thoughts on religions, our main one, church, house, nobility, civils, trade, customs. That's what it was from from Joe. Yeah, Zuko. And then I've got two snakes as well, Appa and Ventress are my two ball pythons, which I could even bring out for a stream one of these days. Be fun. I like to chill on my neck. Let's see here. So I think similar to the gods and religion, there is, to answer Joe's question, I want it to be as simple as possible for people who want to participate. I want to establish the essential stuff, which is mostly the nobility, is like the kings, his courts, whatever. And then there might be the deep lore of other stuff. So for civilizations, for example, the essential lore is there is only SpireHelm. It is the city in the realm. The deep lore is that there are also other civilizations and forts that are out there, but they are all legs of SpireHelm, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. As far as nobility goes, I think that's one that I haven't really touched on. And we'll make that one red, because that's one that I should pick up on. Nobility. Towns slash, what would you call a medieval region? Like, newcomer riding a knight who is going to slay a monster. How is he knighted? Who does he serve? See, that's a great question. And that's actually one of those things that we didn't get a chance to add that I was about to. And we, a barony, I think is the right word. I think that's it. Let's see, barony definition. Land or estate held by a baron or baroness. Yeah. Towns, regions, baronies. I think barony is more familiar, Ollie. I've never heard of voivodeship, but so I think we'll probably stick with barony or something of the sort. But to answer Joe's question, let's see. A knight who's going to slay a monster, how is he knighted? Who does he serve? That's right. One of the things I was going to make kind of like the Ignis specs before I got absolutely overrun with homework and other life things was the Knights of the Realm, because I think ideally we make three different types of quote unquote main characters. If people were to create their own characters in the world, which is what most people want to do, is they want to write a story about somebody in SpireHelm, and I think that's the most fun, is writing a story. Some people love just writing lore, but I think most people want to read about the happenings. Currently we have one. It's the Collector, and the Collector can represent a bit of different things. It can represent a scholar, it can represent an adventurer, it can represent a zealot, in kind of those ways, wherever they intermingle in a Venn diagram. But one of the main things that people want from a fantasy is the knights. They want a knight in shining armor, they want the chivalry and the heroism and adventure of somebody who is maybe a little bit more zealous in some areas, and who is willing to go to more lengths than an average collector who's just out there to find. And I think if we made a third, I haven't really thought about what the third would be, then you'd have almost a perfect group. If you were to play a D&D game, if you were to write a story with multiple characters, you have a group of questers, adventurers, who go out, and you've got a collector, you've got a knight, and you've got whatever this third is. And that, I want that dynamic to feel real and natural and be like, oh yes, this is exactly what I would expect from a SpireHelm adventure book or story or whatever. The one that I'd come up with that I am leaning away from now was an idea of a Sanctiarch, which I think I can pull up here. I think I have Liber Selecti, Sanctiarch. So this is all I really had. A group of 7 Sanctiarchs are sworn in oath to Aletheus shortly before he vanished. These knights swore an oath to protect the realm from darkness at whatever cost. At the time, the knights thought nothing of it until the darkness started to grow and suddenly the king disappeared. They took it upon themselves to uphold their vow and protect the realm from the reality of the dangers that were growing. When the task became too much to bear, one of the knights perished. The other 6 made the decision to start their own orders of Sanctiarchs and knights to further protect the realm. My original idea for these was they would be a secret order of knights that were like the Delta Force of, like, they're the secret squad that not even the people know about, like the Grey Knights from Warhammer, where it's like if a Grey Knight shows up, they have to kill all the normal guardsmen because they're not even allowed to know of their existence. I don't like that though, because that takes away from people looking up to non-gods, and having heroes that are just men. I think there are men and women, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. They're the normal Spire folk who take upon themselves the duty and the heroism to protect the people they love, and whether it's for vengeance or whatever it is. Those are the stories that people latch onto. It's the ones that all the main stories are. The average Joe, it's the hero's journey, whatever. The average Joe gets ripped from his home. This girl watches her father get slain by these orcs, and now she has this vengeance to protect. She's going to protect her siblings at all costs because now her parents are gone. And so she would then train or do whatever and become a Sanctiarch of the realm. I don't know if I love the name. I like the idea because it's kind of like a sanctification in a way where there are a lot of ties to like this pseudo-religious zealotry, like the Crusades a little bit. I don't want it to be too Crusade-ish, but in a way they're the ones who are really there to protect and sanctify. They see it as a cleansing of evil in the realm, because it is. Like, the evil here is legitimate and really, really bad and nasty. And so they're right in doing so. That's the difference here, is in a lot of historical knights, there's this gray area of like, I know you believed in your religion, and that's good, but doing what you did is a little bit questionable. But then you look at like Aragorn, and it's like, oh no, this dude is the good guy. He is the king. He is all of these things, and they're fighting for actual good against really good, like real evil. And I think that's, if we were to go back to, I lost it. Where'd he go? Nope, not that one. That one. I don't even know what to call this. I don't even know how to name it. If we look back to here, that is the perfect. That is the tones. That's the traditional familiar archetype, is good versus evil. It's the average guy becoming a knight and ascending to this like higher status of character development or whatever. I'm secretly a frail British boy. So yeah, I think I just don't know how I feel about the name Sanctiarch, but this was my next Ignispecs level lore release that was on the pipeline. So that's what I'm kind of juggling with right now, is do we call them Sanctiarchs? I like the idea of there being 7 of them originally, or some number, and then after one of them died, the king leaves, and then one of them dies, kind of like a Sanguinius. Once again, I don't want it to feel like I'm just stealing from Warhammer, but like these, or Roshar, or the Cosmere, or whatever, Brandon Sanderson, the Lord of the Rings, but these are all familiar things that have been. Warhammer didn't invent Sanguinius and a sacrificial noble dying and their posterity. Like, it's a martyr. It's a martyr situation, you know. And so it's not 100% a copy. These are familiar things to everybody that people will resonate with. And so I think that pushes the rest of the Sanctiarchs to go, oh, we should really, really, we're not going to be able to do this on our own. Now that there's only 6 of us, we're going to die way faster. We can't do this on our own. The evil is growing and the king seems to be gone. So let's start training an order of knights and let's knight them in to being a Sanctiarch and whatever. And that opens up a new door for additional magic. Like, if they were sworn into oath by Alythius, they probably have some amount of magic, and we don't know where it comes from. There is no, well, it comes from, and if you don't do this, then this. It's just, are you a Sanctiarch? Are you one of the knights? Then that's it. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. Oh, whoa. There we go. Do we like the name Sanctiarch? Do we call just the 6 that are remaining Sanctiarchs and the rest of their followers knights, because that's very easy and familiar? Or do we, once again, try to come up with our own name for SpireHelm? Or do we call them the Knights of the Sanctiarch? Like, these are the ideas that I'm trying to think of what fits best, what makes the most sense, what is sustainable, what will people engage with and not feel like they have to memorize a ton of names. Because that's another thing with sci-fi fantasy novels, is it feels like there's a million things to memorize, and I don't want that to happen. It's easy to be like, oh, this is a knight, but do we have a different name for them? I don't know. That's one that I'll probably keep thinking about, but for now, oh my gosh, I can't type. Oh my gosh. Their own orders of, start their own orders of knights. The Knights of the Sanctiarch. I think that's probably what I like the most. And maybe the Sanctiarch is this oath. And so they are then the knights carrying on this oath for their Sanctiarch. Like, you can call the oath is also called the Sanctiarch, and the 7 Sanctiarchs are the main guys, you know? We can have different knightly orders, but not make them exclusive. What do you mean by not exclusive? Knights of this could be Knights of the Sanctiarch, and the 6 are also named Sanctiarchs. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. What do you mean by non-exclusive, Ollie? I feel like there would be a multi-class orders. Yeah, like there would be levels of, like, there's a fixed amount of them. Oh yeah, like there's no fixed amount. The fixed amount is the 6. So there is 6 orders. That way, when people come, they don't have to. We're not constantly adding on new stuff. But within those, there is any number of knights. Probably, I would imagine, in the low hundreds, like between 50 to 100 knights per order at any given time, because they die. They die protecting the realm. And there's only so fast that you can train up new recruits. So they're rare, and they are like heroic, but you would only have 300 to 400 knights combined from all the orders roaming around at any given point. But there's no like strict limit of like, oh, we only have 20 knights at a time, and until one dies, we won't train another. It's like, no, we're doing this as much as we can. It's just heroes are hard to come by, and the realm is really, really dangerous. And so, as it's been flowing, it's like, you know, 20 to 50 per order kind of thing, 20 to 100, you know, not like they're just not an army size. They have their militias, their armies, but to become a Sanctiarch, you need to be like a hero. And maybe that's part of it from a storytelling perspective, that to become a Sanctiarch, you have to have done something heroic for them to see you as one of their knights. And I think as a being a knight, in order to keep the stereotypical what people expect to find, I think it's probably they need to be good fighters. Like that's what makes a Sanctiarch, is that they are capable of dispelling evil. Like that's what they do, is they dispose of evil. And so heroic acts like I don't know what heroic acts that aren't fighting wouldn't make you a Sanctiarch, wouldn't, you know, it would just make you, it would give you some other sort of renown in the realm. And I think collectors do that by themselves. They could be granted higher status as a collector or scripturum or whatnot, for doing other things. But the Sanctiarchs are the knights. And I think magic can also fit in there somewhere. I think wizards could become Sanctiarchs. And maybe at another time, maybe next week or something, we can go through what these orders look like, what distinguishes the 6 orders. Is there even a point to 6 orders, or do you just have one? I don't know. I don't know if, like, I don't want it to feel too much like Warhammer, where there's chapters and each chapter has their own specific thing. I don't, part of me feels hesitant to do that, because you run into the same thing of like, what's the essential lore and what's the deep lore? The essential lore should be all the Sanctiarchs, all the Knights of the Sanctiarch are consistently what you would imagine a medieval knight to be. Just that, you know, like they are this realm's knights. I don't want you to have to be like, oh, well, this chapter versus this chapter, and they're so different because they're of these different things. I think the distinguishing factor between the orders should be something more about what type of heroism they look to. Once again, this is going back to freaking Brandon Sanderson now. I can't get it out of my head. Oh my gosh, the orders of Radiance are fairly similar. There's a bunch of them. There's 10, I think, orders of Radiance. But to those that follow the law, they have one. For those that make oaths, they have one. For those that, I don't want it to just feel like that. But the other option is just Warhammer, where it's like, these guys love wolves. These guys are like Vikings. These guys are like Crusaders, and these guys are like flamethrower guys, but they're also really nice. I don't want it to feel like that. I want there to be a consistent visual feel, and I think keeping it simple to each knight has their own personality that makes them individually unique, but all the knights are kind of the knights of the Sanctiarch. We can just make them orders, have different flags and a motto. Yeah. Side question, how do we name language-wise? How do we feel about the regular use of Old English as a basis for calling things? Yeah, I think Old English is probably the most safe thing to rely on. I was actually reading through some things here. Is this the one? Yeah, the works of Sir Thomas Malory, written in the medieval or late medieval, I think, 11th century or so. But like, you look at this, and it's like, to whom I answered that divers men hold opinion that there was no such Arthur, and that all such books has been mad of him, been but feigned and fables. Like, this type of, you know, nay of his knights, you know, like that type of stuff is classic, but, and it sounds cheesy. Oh, not that we have to write like this. I wouldn't be able to read this. We can write in modern English, but I think, yeah, leaning on names of like, of Latin and languages and such, I think you're pretty safe. Yeah, relying on like Old English, Middle English, that type of thing. Pendragon, England, and so reigned that there was a mighty duke in Cornwall that held war against him a long time. The Duke was called the Duke of Tingale. Yeah. So, off-topic question: how much do we revise when it comes to the Pantheon? What do you mean by that? How much do we revise? What was that? Oh, okay. Formal modern language, bordering on Middle English. Yeah, I think make it readable first and foremost. I think making it accessible to people to read and understand is probably the most fun. We're not limited by language, so we can do, you know, we can write like normal people. Um, just make it feel enough that it feeds into these like, oh yeah, this kind of feels like what I expect from a medieval fantasy realm with low magic. Too much salt ruins the dish. Yeah, yep, pretty much. Um, we need to talk about Pantheon as well as one that I'll have to touch on because that one I think will need some revisiting. Rewrite the master lore doc? Yes and no. Not rewrite the entire thing. I won't start from scratch, but I think I'll go in and probably edit a good chunk of it. Just now that once again, I'm just kind of thinking about what is serving our goals, our aims, what's serving the vibes, the content, the collaboration, and what isn't. And this is going to be a really big thing is like, what's the essential lore? What's the deep lore that people can spend weeks and months and years finding? And then what's the everything else that you would never be able to keep up on? You can keep up on some of it. And I think that's where the fun of the community comes in is like, oh, I've been keeping up with Ollie and Mir's stuff with the Fae, right? Isn't it? Is it you two that are doing it, or is it someone else? Is it? I don't remember who's doing the Fae stuff. I've been keeping up on that, but I haven't been keeping up on somebody else's stuff with these. You know, it's only possible to read so much. So I think this is the one where it's like you pick and choose what part of this you want to participate in. You pick and choose whether or not you want to participate in any of this at all. And this is like this stuff you should need to know so that when you're talking to somebody who understands who's in this community, you know, then you're both talking on the same wavelength and you're not going like, I haven't even heard of that. And you're like, oh, that's like the basic stuff. No, have you not heard of the basic stuff? You don't even know, you know. If it's deep lore, it's like, oh, you haven't heard of this? This is really cool. You should look into this. And it's like, oh, okay. Like this is the stuff this is the main course. This is your fruits and vegetables and your grains. This is like the dessert of like, that does sound kind of cool to listen to. And then this is like the a la carte, pick your own, whatever you want to read, you can read, and whatever you don't, it's a snack. You just take as much of it as you want. So, SpireHelm the realm. It is the kingdom and the realm. I don't know where this should go. This is getting really, really messy. There's a lot here. I want to talk more about the feel, the vibes. But that's so hard because I feel like how do you explain the vibes of Elden Ring or Warhammer without just explaining some of it? I feel like the story and the lore of Elden Ring is the preface for what the vibes are. You get a sense like when you explain certain things and you interact with certain things in the world, that is the vibes. There isn't much else other than the traditional dark fantasy, retro dark fantasy art that we've seen, AI generated or otherwise. Though that's like the vibe that people know. What will separate SpireHelm from that is just going to have to be the lore that I solidify and fix. And just move some stuff around so lines don't overlap. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Probably do this. Let's do that. Um, um, this goes to the bottom. I think that's why I had it like that. I think that's just the realm. The content will probably be more than just lore, hopefully. That's the problem here. Oh, that did not work how I thought it would. Weird. Oh my gosh. Ah. Okay, that didn't work. Baronies. Lions? I don't know what that means. He's gone cold. Rock bottom has officially been hit. Dang. Let's do one more kind of top-down push for a second, for a little bit, and then I think we might wrap up stream. So let's just do this. Why are people here? I think that's the most important thing. Let's slot that in right there. People want retro dark fantasy content, which is not happening mostly, at least not how people want. And so we're going to try to be part of the people who are making cool stuff, because there's only a few people out there doing it. So why not be part of it? Why do people want to participate in SpireHelm, or why should they? First things first is the vibes. Obviously, there's not a lot of people making content, and so primarily here for the vibes. Second is probably content collaboration. Probably about the same. We still haven't really answered what the collaboration looks like or what the content looks like. Part of me wants the content to be the Wanderer. I think that would be a healthy place actually now to push things, because it would let people who don't care about writing interact with SpireHelm, which so far has been very hard to do, especially since I haven't been posting anything and we haven't really made anything other than the Ignis specs. It would give people a story to connect to, and it would also pass some of the time between me writing the lore and or like the finishing the frame of the lore, so that people have a better understanding of what to do and how to do stuff, without just the only option being to write for other people, because that's just a lot. And if it's not, I don't know what the word is, it's not fitting what everybody's doing, then it's I don't want to encourage people to make stuff that I'm going to say no to, is basically what I'm trying to say. So some of that could be the Wanderer, some of that could be the lore, or let's do guide slash booklets. This is one that like I could start doing things like the Ignis specs, but for other things that people could read, use. That's the thing is, like, what are these for though? The Ignis specs was a blueprint slash, what did I call it? I don't remember. I have no idea. I had some naming conventions for some of the things, like a blueprint or a frame or a, I don't know, inspiration or something. Um, Anyways, the point of the ignis specs was, here's some good fuel for writing. Here's some good fuel for if you want to come up with something new, you can come up with your own ignis specs. And here is a core tenet, like a core building block of the realm. This is something that is interacted with often and is they're rare, but they're a legend that is known widely. People understand what it means when you say ignis specs, what it means when you say you're going out in the woods with some stuff to find some guy. You know, that's something that's built into the culture of the people in SpireHelm. So I think that's a good one. I don't know, other than the essential lore, which could be its own. Who knows how long that would end up being? I don't want it to be obviously a book length, but like the last one was 8 pages or something. The ignis specs. You know, if we're talking 16 pages or something, that's getting up there with like a zine level. You know, it gets big, and for what purpose? Just for people to know where to start, I think is a good idea, because if they're going to get into the collaboration side of things, or they want to be able to connect, you know, talk with people, I think the essential lore is a good one. But some of that could change because I'm kind of retconning a bunch of stuff, and there's a good chance that in the future we have to go back and revise some stuff. Just the nature of this project is very, things happen. We have to make decisions before the final product, and so, or there is no final product before the future. And in the future, we might decide this idea is better, and we might have to go back and roll back some things. I don't know if I want to make a ton on deep lore, at least not until I feel like we've run out of stuff to do for essential lore. Then I might say, okay, let's talk about the gods. Let's make a booklet for the Pantheon and whatnot. I think that's kind of cool. And then the other content I want to make, the whole point of this, for me, believe it or not, is just for art practice. I want to become a concept artist, and I'm in school for it now. So a lot of it is just like I'm giving myself, and you guys are giving me prompts of things to draw. So art. Well, let's just do art. Art. And the art can go into the guides and booklets, and the art can look like story illustrations, as well as concepts, maps. Once again, my hardest thing is like, I just don't want to make stuff for the sake of making stuff. I want everything to serve a purpose. So, and then the other content is everybody's, I guess you could argue that the Grand Archive, every submission that you guys give is some of the content that people can read. Once again, most of it will probably end up kind of in here, which is not useless stuff. It's expanding the depth of the project, like I talk about all the time. Instead of expanding it sideways and vertically, we're expanding it deep. We're adding layers to this painting that we're making while staying within the frame, within the realm and stuff. But a lot of it won't be, it'll be connected. Like each of these, in a way, is reliant on the former. So it's not that this stuff is useless. It's just that this stuff isn't the essential lore. The essential lore is the stuff that you have to know in order to write. Otherwise, you'll be writing generic fantasy or something wrong. Not like wrong. You'll be writing in the wrong universe, kind of thing. And then if you're going to write anything in deep lore, it would be affected by the essential stuff. And if you're going to write everything else, then chances are you are either relying on the deep lore or the essential lore, some combination of those two. Okay. I think that's a decent start. So if we were to do this, I mean, I think this is kind of it. The vibes should inform the content, and the collaboration is some of the content, and some of the content will fuel the collaboration. These kind of will go back and forth. The content that I give you guys should help you create content, which will make better collaborations. And the stuff that you guys make will inspire me and other people to make more stuff, to do. The Elidian Path is no longer a thing. I don't remember what that is. Was that one of the projects you guys were working on? So how will we handle writing essential lore? What constitutes essential? There are different races and species essential lore, and where do we draw the line? Oh, I think you weren't here for it. So for the most part, the essential lore will be me writing only. Just the nature of the project and how things will have to work. I don't like being I don't want to be the god of the project and force everything, because at that point I should just write a book, which I don't want to do. If I wanted to write a book, I would have written a book. What I want to do is create cool stuff for other people to interact with, whether it be visually or on a tabletop or through art, whatever. And I want to give myself some cool stuff to make and connect it to something that does physically exist, not just cool ideas. But yeah, the essential lore will be pretty much me saying no to a bunch of stuff and saying yes to a very small number of things. The essential lore, I think we talked about being 20 minutes or less, should get you covered on everything you need to know. If you think about your favorite fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, Star Wars, you say there's the Empire and there's the Rebellion, there's the Jedi who used to fight for good, but then Order 66 happened. You could summarize most of the important stuff in Star Wars in 20 minutes, max. And everything else, the different legions of clones, the bounty hunters and each of their lives, Cad Bane, where he comes in, Jango Fett, all of these extra little bits are the deep lore. That's the stuff that's if you want to dig into some of the essential lore, there's probably places to dig in. Everything else isn't, once again, this is not a trash can, this is not a bad thing. We want this, we need this. This is just everything else that you could possibly write about these things is in the everything else, and most of that takes place in the Grand Archive through the stuff that you guys are writing, which is the adding depth. It's okay, well, we have the Sancti Arcs. There were 7 Sancti Arcs, one of them died, and then they started their own 6 orders. That's the essential lore. The deep lore is, well, what you might not know about each of the 6 orders is that they each have their own way of doing things or their own ideals and morals and whatever. The everything else that's ever been written is let me tell you a story about one of the first of this 4th order and his band that went on an adventure to conquer evil and do all this stuff. I probably won't write that because I just don't have the time. And if I want to do art and if I want to do some more essential writing and I want to keep slowly expanding this frame, I just won't have time for it. I can write some of the deep lore, and you guys can write some of the deep lore. This will probably be the Venn diagram of what you guys write versus what I write. But for the most part, that's kind of where everything else that's ever been written goes. And you don't need to get any of this canonized. That's the best thing, is once again, the Ignis specs, that's the essential lore. The deep lore is, I don't even know. The deep lore is stuff that you guys come up with. It's I made an Ignis specs for Moss. I made an Ignis specs for, somebody made one for a soul or something. You bring them souls and they burn the souls, whatever. That's super cool. That's stuff that is basically canon. It doesn't need to be canonized. It's just, that's something that if people want to dig into, they can go look and they can see all the Ignis specs that have ever been and that it could ever be. And then everything else that's ever been written is let me tell you a story about this person who interacted with this Ignis specs that Mir wrote about, and connect these 2 stories where mine was about a knight, yours was about an Ignis specs. I'm now going to bridge them together and create this beautiful, awesome connection story, adventure, whatever. I hope that kind of makes sense. Any other questions? Do you guys have any questions? I mean, I know we didn't probably get through some of the stuff that people wanted to, but I will hopefully be able to stream next week. I'll work on this over the weekend and keep thinking, and this has been really helpful, and I'll revise this as needed. And maybe I'll take a screenshot of this and just push it to the Discord for those who want this reference. This is mostly for me to know what we're doing, but how's the website? What website? I wish there was a website. That is one of those things that probably needs to happen. I'm also thinking about just revamping the Discord. I don't want to just burn everything to the ground and restart. but part of me is like, it's really complicated, and I feel like we could simplify a lot in the Discord. We could just get like a couple channels for submissions that people can just look through. Honestly, I wanted to make a subreddit, but I think because I made a SpireHelm account on Google and then I made a SpireHelm Reddit account, and then I immediately went and made a SpireHelm subreddit, they flagged me for being like a bot or some sort of like farmer or something. I just wanted to claim the name before it happened by itself. I just wanted to like make the Reddit. It didn't work, and so it's banned. It's permanently banned for no reason. So I need to figure out how to get that back and hopefully do it, because I think that'd be a better place for people to submit their stuff. I don't know if you can submit links to Google Docs or whatever there, but like, and then people can discuss them, and you can filter and you can add tags and stuff like that. The Discord is really just I feel like the Discord is just the worst place to host people's creative stuff. I think a Reddit subreddit would probably be better, and the Discord then could just be about discussion and lore and collaboration. You could just riff off of each other and figure things out and talk about things. So I'll think about some of that over the weekend and figure out what that'll look like going forward. Yeah, I'll see if I can get the subreddit back. It got permanently banned. If you go to r/SpireHelm, I think it's just permanently banned. Let's see. Reddit / page not found. I don't know if that's the same thing. Yep, SpireHelm was banned. Browse other communities. So Reddit feels less connected community-wise, though. Yeah, it does. Reddit and Discord both have their fallbacks, their drawbacks, which is why ideally we have it on like a website. I want to make a really cool website, but like the stuff I want to do just doesn't exist in like Squarespace or Wix or those type of editors. It just doesn't. So we'll see, and move to MySpace. Yeah, we'll see what we end up coming up with and what makes the most sense. For now, I think the most important thing, obviously, is that there's too many gaps in the essential lore that everybody else has been rushing to fill in, which is super cool, but just not the most sustainable or productive. And so, unfortunately, somebody has to be in charge a little bit and say no to some things and figure out what is going to be official and what's not. Which, it's fun when like everybody is on the same, when everybody can do whatever they want, but then also nothing exists, really. Like nothing is meaningful. There is no hierarchy. And so I think what really needs to happen for now is I need to revisit the essential lore, figure out what's really good, what's just okay, and what's worth chopping or reworking. I can read through some of the canon requests as I'm doing that, maybe next week, and just see like, okay, of all these ideas that people have thrown out, which ones make sense, which ones don't, which ones are worth including in official essential canon, what stuff could be deep lore, what stuff could we revisit later. So yeah, I think I'll do maybe a canon request next week at some point, because I have seen some cool ones. But I've also seen the majority, I will say, the majority of stuff submitted in canon requests doesn't need to be there. The majority of the stuff is just stuff that doesn't need to be approved or anything. It's just stuff that could be in deep lore or everything else. So yeah, let's just make a TikTok group chat with everybody who cares about SpireHelm, and then we can just send memes and do everything in there. What would the subreddit be? Strictly only final submissions? No, I think like anything. I think the subreddit would ideally just be another place to have things, but I know on a lot of subreddits you can do like tags. Let me go to like the MCDM has one. Oh, maybe they don't have tags. Warhammer. I'm not in that many on this account. Yeah, like news and rumors, hobby and painting, probably some memes, whatever. Anyways, so like you could have, yeah, art, cosplay, OC, stuff like that, video games. And so we could have tags, and one of them would be like archive submission or whatever. And that would be one that, like, if you want to just filter through those, you could just click that tag and it would just show you all the submissions. If you want to just click memes, you can click all the memes and whatnot. So I don't know. That's probably where it should live, where that kind of stuff should live. But once again, that I don't want to commit too hard to something if we're going to move it somewhere else eventually. But I think the Discord will always be a decent place to at least talk with each other, ask questions, get in touch with me directly or indirectly or whatever. Like I'll try to keep up with it more. I haven't been able to very much, but and I didn't want to get too locked in. I didn't want to spend all my time catching up on every single little thing if the majority of it is just going to be rewritten or not like decanonized or thrown out. But you know, I didn't want to commit to it too much if we're going to be making a bunch of changes anyways. Okay. Well, I think that's most of what I wanted to get through today. Other content is probably TikToks / YouTube vids. That's another one where I want to kind of pick things back up again. Yeah, I really don't have anything planned yet for that. And that's the hard thing too. Like at the beginning, I was like, oh, let me just get out a bunch of content. But then I'm like, what's even the point to, if I don't have anything for people to read and write from, then trying to explain certain things is only going to make it more confusing for people because they're going to go, well, what do you mean by that? And I go, oh, well, it's in my head. I just haven't put it on paper yet. And it's going to be a thing that's going to be here eventually. Kind of like the Sanctity arcs where it's like, oh, I know you want knights, but like, just wait until I get the knights done. And it's like, we can't wait like 6 months for knights to come out and expect everything to be fine. So, cool. I think that's it then. I will. Where do we stand on semi-scientific paper approaching the writing documents? Depends. Magic isn't supposed to be science. So if you're analyzing like magic systems, you're probably doing too much. Magic is meant to be kind of unknowable and mystic. But if it's something else, it can be kind of scientific. A lot of it should be more collecting myth, legend, stories, tales. Yeah. Yeah, we'll probably simplify the Discord server. Species. Oh yeah, that's another thing too. I could be here all day. Yeah, species is one that we're probably going to simplify the species list as well, where there will be the essential lore of species, where it's like human, elf, dwarf. That's kind of like the main, and then maybe one or two others. But I don't want to go like more than 5, probably main sentient civilized species. And then there's like the deep lore where it's like you could go into monsters. Like I think like the essential lore is there are dragons, there are mythical creatures. The deep lore is like here are some things that make our dragons that are slightly different than other dragons. And then everything else is like I am going to tell you about this specific type of gnome that lives in this forest, and I'm going to tell you about this fae species and these fairies and whatever. So, but once again, if it's a fantasy, if it's a magical species, it's kind of the same. You don't need to go scientific on the taxonomy of certain species. I think there could be connections, obviously. I think it's healthy to have like, but it should only be to the point of the people. It's what would the Spire folk be writing and be doing? If they would be saying, wait, are these two species related? Then maybe they would go, okay, here's this. But if we think back to medievalism, Darwinism wasn't a thing, evolution wasn't a thing. They weren't thinking about taxonomies and whatever. They cared about ancestries. And they do have some amount of like the greater dragons gave birth to the lesser dragons, and these are the lesser dragons, and of them are these different types. But if it's like completely scientific to where like we're using nowadays like DNA and all of these taxonomic, strategies and research methods to figure out which animals are related to each other and how, that's probably stuff that just isn't really, it's not super SpireHelm, It's fun and it's cool and you're more than welcome to do it. It's just that I think there are cooler stuff for SpireHelm that you could be working on that could incorporate those things, or even use the lore that you've written and turn the lore into writing. So different groups are not like evolution. I mean, you could talk about evolution, how like animals change. Like, oh yeah, there's this legend that back in the day, this animal used to behave this way, and now they've grown wings and horns, and they've evolved. That's totally okay. But the submission, not the last thing I would want to see. I don't want it to sound like it's a bad thing. Once again, the last thing that I think you should submit is, here is the taxonomical progression of these species. If you turn the lore into writing, if you turn the lore into a story, and you package it in a way that's like, that is meaningful to engage with, that's where I think the real fun is. Because it lets you can world build your lore and your stuff, and then you turn it into something that's like, that is the content that people want. Not just the lore, but like, there's something that it's like, feels like a story or a book or whatever. That's, if that makes sense. Like there's a difference between, there's actually a video I watched recently from MCDM on YouTube called, I think, Lore versus Writing. I don't know if I can do this, but let me see. If I can send this. Oh, I didn't even do it on there. That's funny. I can send this here in this chat maybe really quickly. Oh yeah, that worked. So that video is really good. This is from a perspective of a dungeon master. So he's saying kind of similarly though. I think a lot of the same things apply. The lore is important, but the lore is only important so much as it serves the narrative or the story or the world, the vibes, like we've been saying this whole time. Like if it's serving these things, then it's probably worth doing. However, the lore being presented just as lore might not be the most engaging, or I don't know. But then there's a part of me that's like, well, but then what if other people want to collaborate? And I think that's where you could share your notes after the fact as a separate thing, kind of to a submission or whatever. I think our main purpose should not be to write lore. Our main goal should be to write stories and drama, whatever you want to call it, things that are engaging, like really meaningful and fun to read. Like the whole point here is to have fun. And I think most of us in the Discord are people who enjoy writing lore and coming up with structures and connecting all these things together. But I also don't love reading everybody else's lore, because my lore is the coolest. So why would I read anybody else's? Not literally, but to a certain degree, it's like, let's write stuff that will get other people excited, not just the stuff that excites us. But let's use the stuff that excites us to write that stuff for other people. I think that'd be really fun, and will be probably the best thing to do. Cool. Any other questions before I go? I think these can be detached here. Let's just put this here. Write stories, not lore. Especially for now, with how wishy-washy the lore is right now and how much adjustment I'm going to be doing, I think you're much better off writing stories than lore as of right now. Let's just make it like white. Just to highlight it a little bit. Any more original content I have planned? The main stuff I had planned was actually let me double check because I might. The Sanctity arc was the main thing that I was pretty excited about, that I was hoping to implement. So that one will be some more original content. I would love to make the Sanctity arcs into their own little zine, their own little booklet, like I did the Ignis specs. And I don't even know how that's gonna work. If I have a, I think I'll wait for a while to do an official booklet, like a designed art book, for the basic lore, the essential lore, whatever you want to call it, the world guide for SpireHelm, the realm guide, whatever, until after we have until the frame is finished. But I will be publishing that writing as it's being adjusted on the essential lore doc and whatever until then. Yeah, the Sanctity arc was the main one. If I'm trying to think in here, if you guys see anything that stands out in all of these are just video scripts, video ideas. Oh no, that's not even the same stuff. Those collection outline. I wanted to do a collection outline to kind of give people a good idea of how to write, but I feel like a lot of people have kind of like figured it out already. Handouts. Oh, yeah. So this is like the Ignis specs is one of these handouts that I did, the whatever you want to call it, the Ignis specs guide, complete guide, whatever. I think I would do one for Orders of Magic. If this doesn't get rewritten, there's a chance that we end up kind of doing away with the Orders of Magic, because I think as of right now, we have like Wizardry, Sorcery, Arcanism, Benediction, Druidcraft, Hematurgy, Alchemy, and Anathergy, which I think is totally fair, and I think that's probably reasonable and will probably stay that way. So I may do one on Orders of Magic. Creatures of the Realm I think would be really fun. I think it's a healthy thing to have some unique creatures that are found in our fantasy that aren't in others. So that people can say, oh, that thing, that creature, that's definitely from SpireHelm. Like you look at the Lurkers, they're kind of their own thing, especially the creatures of darkness, like the Dark Ones manifestations. I think that would be a really fun one. A Realm Atlas. This one is one that I think will probably get pushed to the very bottom of the list, because I just can't imagine a world where this is really reasonable to do. With how much stuff gets added, you can't cover everything, and a map, like we talked about before, a map is kind of like one of the last things I want to make, because to the Spire folk, the map consists of the Titans, their village, and the SpireHelm city, and everything else in between is pretty much unknown and not mapped out and confusing and hard to map because of how much it grows and changes and how dense the forest is and all these different things in the wilderness and how likely you are to even survive if you were a cartographer. So the maps are very simple and crude and not very explicit, or yeah, the maps are small. A lot of people have collections of small maps because making a big map is almost impossible because it's too dangerous. It's too big in a way, but not like continent size big. It's a realm. It's a small area, but it's also like things are just changing, and it's impossible to keep track of everything because so much has happened and whatnot. So I don't know if that one will happen. The archive hierarchy is one that maybe I would do, like talking about the different orders of collectors and the Tutus Tenebris and stuff like that. Maybe. Folklore one would be a really cool one. If I want to get to this as soon as possible. This is like the one I'd have the most fun with, is taking the best submissions from you guys and compiling them into, here are the stories of the realm. Here are the legends that people, like, say a writer in the realm, a storyteller that would go around town to town and lift people's spirits by telling them stories. If he were to write a book, this would be his book of like, these are the coolest, the most amazing legends and myths and stories of the realm. Some of them true, some of them exaggerated, and some of them entirely false. So if there was one about one of the knights of the Sanctity arc, that would be a story in there. If there was one of collectors going out, that would be a story. If there was one of a weird creature, a gnome in a forest. That could be one. All of those, taking all of your guys' submissions, pulling them together, doing some real good illustration for them, maybe even hiring other illustrators to do some stuff for it, compiling into one really cool book and pushing that out. And I would do, volumes of these, ideally, so that, if we had SpireHelm year one, whatever, we could take the coolest, the most awesome ones that everybody loves and do some that I think are the most supportive of what I feel is the SpireHelm vibe, like the most fitting for SpireHelm. And then I'd love to do some that are like community votes of like, we all love this one, even if I think it's just okay. If you guys are like, this is the coolest one, we could do some votes and stuff like that. That's one that I would love to do. But right now, it's just the frame isn't finished yet. And most of the stuff that people have written wouldn't even fit in here. Most of the stuff that people have written has been lore and adding and expanding to the world, not stories within the world. If the map changes over time by some ancient magic, it already does, but doesn't. Like the specific locations of cities, or the one city, in relationship to the world is pretty much the same. Like the big lakes and the big mountains and the big rivers are all the same. But within each little clade and forest, things are just like mountains, like hills will move and valleys and rivers will shift and pull, and towns will, like when a town gets eaten by a death storm or whatever the equivalent will be, they vanish and then overgrowth happens. And so you might say, okay, well, like Blackthorn Brook is like 3 days this way, and you've been traveling for 4 days, and you're like, I swear we're going north. And then you check, and you're like, yeah, we're going north. Turns out you've walked over the whole thing, and now you're completely lost because the whole thing, everything has changed, and the topology and what the landmarks have shifted. So like, that's a real thing. But like the entire realm is still a realm, just like bits of it shift. Connecticut size, still don't really know yet, but pretty small. Probably not, maybe not Connecticut size, maybe a little bit bigger than that. Death Storms are revised. Yeah, we're maybe revising Death Storms, but probably not much. Locking on SpireHelm, same. Death Storms revised to be. We don't really know. Do we have a common archive submission skeleton? Not yet. That's one of the ones I was thinking about doing. Storm part seems like the Stormlight archive, and yeah, like the high storms, the Everstorm, the Death Storm. Like it's just, I don't want it to just be another one. Ireland or UK sized? Yeah, it's probably a little bit more fair. Although no, probably not that big though. I don't know, because there was multiple kingdoms in the UK and in Wales. There was like multiple. I'm thinking like SpireHelm is like the one big castle, and there are a few other castles, and then there are a few other forts. Like if there was one SpireHelm, then there's 5 castles outside of SpireHelm, and of those 5 castles, there are 5 forts per castle, and then for those castles or the forts, there's 5 villages, and per village there's a few towns, like that kind of thing, where it's like I want one main, so it's one realm, one kingdom, but within that kingdom there are smaller bits, but there's not multiple cities. So I think the UK might be too big, Ireland might be too big. They are pretty small, so maybe. Yeah, framework for submission or archive, not entirely, because a lot of it would be collected by a collector, and they might annotate. Like it could be anything. Maybe I should make a frame on just how to be a collector, maybe. Hiking a certain point in Ireland, yeah, clans and provinces, yeah, it could be maybe similar to that. Yeah, the bureaucracy field could be good. 3 or 4 times the size of Connecticut. Yeah, I don't know. That will come, I think, probably after I've kind of written the lore. Then we can decide, well, how big is this place really? As of now, it's just the realm. I imagine. I guess this is good. How long? Let's see. let's see here. How long can you walk through wilderness in a day? 5 to 10 miles per day in wilderness areas. So, no, you can do more than that. 10 miles? 10 miles per day? We said 10 miles is a day, and it took you, let's see. Sorry, this is like just, I'm going to be thinking here for a minute, so this is probably going to be really boring for people who are watching the stream afterwards. If we wanted the realm to be from SpireHelm to the Titans, take you a month to get from there? No. Probably like a week. A week to get from one end to the other of the realm on horseback. Right? If you're on a horse, how long does it take to, how far can you, $10 to 20 miles per day. Okay, so let's say 20 miles per day takes you a week. You're looking at 140 miles ish from one end to the other. From SpireHelm to the Titans. Sorry, this is like super boring. I'm just thinking this is stuff I probably could have done on my own. So if it takes 1 week on horseback at 20 miles a day, which is like fast. So if you're riding fast on known trails ish, it could take you a week or so. Let's use California for an example. 20 miles, you're looking at 140 miles. Let's get to 150, 200, 200, okay. That's roughly from, basically from like, what is it, LA to Vegas? Is that? $260. Okay, so that's way more. So not even from LA to Vegas. Let's see. Hypothetical horses. Ireland, London. Oh wait, would you look at that? Ireland is about 100 miles across and roughly 150 miles tall or long-ish. So I guess, yeah, Ireland could be a good point of reference, roughly. Yeah, just really dense wilderness. So it would, in a scale, everybody's going to move slower through SpireHelm because it's dense wilderness that is typically unknown and is ever-changing and very dangerous. And so you can move pretty fast as the further you get from the city and from the kingdom, like the main castle, the main whatever fort, mountain of SpireHelm, the slower you're going to move. And so, yeah, you could just the faster you go, or the further you go, the slower you're going to go on horseback, on foot, whatever. So it could take you 2 weeks to cross the realm on foot. Probably like 3 weeks to cross the realm on foot if you were to go from one end to the other. You get halfway in a week, and then the other half would take you 2 weeks. And on horseback, kind of same thing, but half the time. So you could get there, you know, take half a week to get across half the realm, and then the rest of it, whatever. Dublin is SpireHelm now. You know, maybe I should look at Ireland a little bit more because I'm seeing some things that could work. Dublin is on the east. There's not mountains on the west, but like, you know, we can use that as a rough estimate. It might be a little smaller than Ireland. Dublin is 1 million people. Yeah, 1 million people now. Probably not in the Middle Ages. Or, yeah, 1 million people. 3 million people? Yeah, I was going to say, that seems pretty low for Dublin, but maybe. Yeah. So, probably a little bit smaller than Ireland. roughly, which is what? Size of, I don't know, an average US state, like an East Coast state, like South Carolina, West Virginia, Ohio, that kind of size. Not quite as big as, like, obviously not Texas, or probably not even as big as Utah or Oregon or Washington. But okay, well, yeah, I think that's fine. Let me see if there's anything else. Projects. Oh, wow, this one's full. SpireHelm ideas. Dead god worshippers. Ranks of collectors. Collector Illuminatus. Tom Warden's top staff of collectors. Arch Chronicler. I don't know where this came from. Maybe these are just old and I expanded on those already. Yeah, I think some dead god worshipping would be cool to touch on. That would kind of be the deep lore of, like, well, there are the people who worship the Dark One, there are people who worship the gods, and then there are the people who worship the dead ones that don't exist anymore, but they're still holding on. And little do they know that the Dark One is kind of pulling them slowly towards him. Imbued weapons with sentience, that's one of the things I thought about. Storm Wardens is once again, gosh dang it, literally the name Storm Warden is taken by Brandon Sanderson already. So I'm going to have to revise this, unfortunately. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all the stuff I've been working on so far. We'll see what else I come up with. But I think as I'm writing the essential lore, I'll come up with a lot more of, like, oh, we need some of this. Oh, we need some of that. Okay, in that case, I will take a giant picture of this and send it in the Discord so you guys can all just reference this if you need it. This will change, so I'll keep updating it. And then I'll obviously change the lore doc as I can work on it. I'll hopefully be on the Discord most of the, maybe not all night tonight, but I'll be checking in, most of the day today and through the weekend. And hopefully I can get some art done for SpireHelm as well, because that's what I want to be doing this summer since I'm out of school. Okay. Cool. Well, if that's it, then I will see you guys all in the archive. Have a great weekend, and I will hopefully be on again live next week. And we'll see if I end up making any TikToks between now and then, or I don't have any. YouTube videos are a bit more production, and I want to keep them a little bit more professional, so we'll see. Till then, peace out.